What's good, Rip City? Brendan Slaughter here for the Rip City Drive. Micah Parsons is officially a Green Bay Packer as Jerry Jones traded his star linebacker amid their contract dispute. He will sign a 4-year, $188 million deal with the Pack, while Dallas gets defensive tackle Kenny Clark and 2 first-round picks. Parsons' deal includes $120 million guaranteed at signing, $136 total in guarantees. It is the highest non-quarterback deal in NFL history. Oregon State football kicks off the season Saturday night against Cal at 7:30 at Reser Stadium, while the Oregon Ducks host Montana State at Autzen Stadium at 1 o'clock. Coming up on the big show, we'll have Marine Layer podcast host TJ Mathewson, Pro Football Sports Network Chief Analytics Officer Cam Meller, and Oregon State radio voice Mike Parker on the big show. You've got the Rip City Drive on a Thursday. What's going on, Rip City? Brennan Slaughter here for the Rip City Drive Thursday afternoon. Hope everyone's having an awesome Thursday. So far, we've got an awesome show on hand for you guys today, including some college football underway right now as Boise State and South Florida are live on ESPN right now. Broncos and Bulls tied at 0 currently, but early in the first quarter, and the Boise State Broncos looking to score as well. So college football alive and well, folks. Already starting here on Thursday. This game was an early start and going to be looking forward to keeping tabs on it for the rest of the show. Coming up here in about 20 minutes, we're going to be catching up with my good buddy TJ Mathewson, host of the Marine Layer podcast up in Seattle. We talking everything Cal Raleigh, the Mariners playoff push, and much, much more. TJ's been a busy man this season with the Mariners. I tried to get him on earlier when I hosted back in July, but didn't quite work out with schedules and whatnot. But get an off day today. I'm excited to nail down TJ. I want to say we planned this out back in July, and I'm like, hey, I think I'm hosting this day. Think it's an off day for the Mariners. Let's make it happen. So very excited to catch up with TJ because the Mariners are hot right now, and it's definitely been fun to watch them from down here. And with what limited bandwidth I'm able to gather into professional baseball, I've definitely been keeping tabs on the Mariners. So excited to get his thoughts on Cal Raleigh, the season he's had, and a whole bunch more stuff. Again, I haven't got a chance to catch up with TJ in a minute, so that's going to be coming up at 3:20 for all you Mariners fans. Is this really a Mariners team that can make a push for the World Series? TJ will give it to us straight. Then at 4:20, we'll be catching up with Cam Meller from the Pro Football Sports Network. He covers pretty much all things football. Cam obviously specializes in college and the NFL, so he's kind of a go-to as far as many different things. One of mostly focusing on college with him, get his take on a big slate of games this weekend. We'll even get his thoughts on Boise State, South Florida, as, again, Boise State is threatening to score here in the end of the first quarter. Also on the Beavs, the Ducks, Washington State, Washington, get his thoughts on some of the West Coast teams. Also want to get his thoughts on Arizona State, a few other of the highlight teams this year in college football. Also going to be curious to hear what his kind of top 5 quarterbacks are entering the year, too, as there are some dandy quarterbacks in college football this year as well. So lots of things we'll get into with Cam. And then last but certainly not least, we'll catch up with Oregon State play-by-play voice Mike Parker in the final hour, fully priming y'all for Oregon State versus Cal on Saturday night. If you've been listening to the program this week, we've gotten you covered for Oregon State Cal in depth. We're going to take it one step further with Mike Doc Parker a little bit later today. Very excited to talk to Mike. Variety of things. Obviously, this has evolved into quite a intriguing opening matchup for Oregon State, and I think it's going to be the determining game and what comes down to whether or not this is a in my opinion, 6-7 win season for Oregon State, or maybe a little higher in the 8-9 win range. I really think this game is that much of a linchpin for how Oregon State's season will ultimately shake out. So, all that to say, I think that this game against Cal is going to be huge for Trent Bray, huge for the second year of his program, huge for quarterback Malik Murphy, and just overall a big challenge because Justin Wilcox, that defensive unit, they're going to be providing challenges. You know that just right off the cuff that Cal is going to come in and look to punch Oregon State in the mouth from the defensive side of the ball, and they that's not anything Oregon State can take for granted. Cal is some of the best in the ACC as far as being able to scheme up. I'm not going to say that, Cal's a world beater or anything, but even, Oregon State fans, Pac-12 fans know throughout the, last handful of years, ever since Justin Wilcox got down there, Cal's offense been hit and miss. And that's kind of what I expect this weekend. Despite or in fact the fact that Cal has a true freshman starting at quarterback. I think there's only so effective you can be even with that. And as a result, I think Cal's going to have to rely on their defense and running game to have a shot in this matchup. And, I think if Oregon State were to able to really pressure Cal's true freshman quarterback, I think it could be an advantageous situation for them. So we'll see how ultimately that shakes out. We'll talk a little bit more about that with Mike Parker later in the show. But yeah, that's pretty much the plan today, folks. Again, make sure to check us out, Rip City Radio 620 on YouTube. Join the conversation, say hi. Always love to get feedback there. Or you can give us a call, 503-248-0620. Give us a call. Give me your thoughts on air. Again, 503-248-0620. For the rest of this segment, we're definitely going to settle into Micah Parsons and the breaking news that he was traded. Just breaking in between when I left my house and got here to the studio. So obviously this morning I'm prepping for the show, getting ready, and I'm like, okay, just another day with, not a ton of big headlines, so to speak, as kind of we're getting into the nitty gritty of, the final days before college football starts. But nevertheless, as I'm driving here, I find that, I'm like, oh, I see the series of tweets. But the first one that I see, because, X notifications will stack on top of each other. So you have to click on one to reveal the two that came before that. And I saw it was Adam Schefter. And then it was like, oh, highest non-quarterback deal, Micah Parsons. And I'm like, okay, wow, Jerry paid his guy. He's still a Cowboy. Then I click on the notification once again, and it's, oh, no, they've traded him to Micah Parsons traded him to the Dallas Cowboys, or to the Green Bay Packers, excuse me. Words are tough sometimes, Brendan. But it was shocking to me because we heard a little bit of hubbub earlier today, just in, on social media, that the Cowboys were starting to listen to offers. But once again, I didn't think this was, plausible whatsoever. I mean, you go back and you think about the audio clip we played a couple times yesterday from Dak Prescott, just talking about how confident he was that Micah Parsons was going to be back in a Dallas uniform. And nevertheless, here we are, and Micah Parsons is a Green Bay Packer. I'm still kind of letting that sit in a little bit, because on one hand, you can't help but make this comparison, and again, kind of a lazy recent take for me, but this is eerily reminiscent of when, after watching that Cowboy doc, when the Dallas Cowboys decided to trade Herschel Walker for a handful of picks, when he was obviously I'm not sure if Herschel Walker was at the, quote, peak of his powers, but he was pretty darn good. Micah Parsons definitely at the peak of his powers. And you get defensive tackle Kenny Clark, who is a really good player. 2 first-round picks. First-round picks are valuable things in the NFL. And, I could see it from that perspective. Certainly, it's worked for them before, but at the same token, you can't just, create, not to discredit Brad Pitt and Billy Beane and company, but you can't just recreate Micah Parsons in the aggregate. It's not. I mean, you elevate who's ever your next linebacker, but you're talking about a guy who's going to be in Canton one day. He is a no doubt Hall of Famer, and he's going to transform that Green Bay Packers defense. And all of a sudden, Green Bay might want to watch out for the pack, man. What Matt LaFleur's got going up there, mighty impressive. But I want to go ahead and read the statement that Micah Parsons released on social media on Thursday, or today, I should say. Quote, I never wanted this chapter to end, but not everything was in my control. My heart was always been here and still is. Through it all, I never made any demands. I never asked for anything more than fairness. I only asked that the person I trust to negotiate my contract be part of the process. That last line, I only asked that the person I trust to negotiate my contract be part of the process. So when I read that, once again, to me, that's going back to the rumors that we had heard on social media that, Jerry Jones likes to negotiate with players directly, not with agents. Micah Parsons clearly trusted his agent to get this done. And perhaps that was ultimately where the friction and where this marriage ultimately was headed for divorce. So I think that's something. And to me, it's one of these things where going back to what Dan Pizzuta said a couple days ago when we had him on the show, NFL writer, and he said, it would be a Jerry thing to, pay him right before the season starts and, have it take care of. He didn't really seem to think a trade was too much in the works, but, I think this caught a lot of people by surprise. And then lastly, it's at the end of the day, Jerry is going to do what Jerry wants to do. And like it, love it, hate it, can't stand it. At the end of the day, like this is kind of on brand for the Cowboys. And I go back to also what Dan said, like if the Cowboys had offered him a big deal of money last year, maybe they could have signed and got this done instead of waiting until, a break point, so to speak. So in that sense, it's absolutely fascinating to me because I see both sides of it. I think 2 first-round picks is quite something in the NFL. I would have felt a whole lot better if I was a Cowboy fan if there were 3, but Kenny Clark's worth probably 2. So you look at that, and that's probably 4 first-round picks for a player roughly, and an impact player who will impact your defense right away in Kenny Clark. But dang, like it's still just again not a Cowboy fan, not a Packer fan particularly, but it's just when you see a seismic trade like this happen, and it's pretty insane. And I really thought that Dallas was going to do whatever they had to kind of hang on to him for as long as they needed. And for what it's worth, learning a little bit more about this trade, there you go. Herschel Walker was 27 when he was traded. Micah Parsons is 26. I would argue I think linebackers have a little bit more of a longevity than running backs, especially now. But again, you go back to that documentary, one of the more telling things was Dallas would not have won their Super Bowls without making that trade and trading away Herschel Walker. Now, I'll say this. I believe they got 5 first-round picks for Herschel Walker. 2 and Kenny Clark isn't that. So you can't instantly think, it's Super Bowl or bust, now for Dallas, and they've got all the pieces, but maybe this is how they needed to pivot. It's interesting. I see both sides of this, but the big winner here is Green Bay. I mean, the Pack are back, and this is going to be they are going to be a dangerous team this year. Watch out for Green Bay this year. All right, we'll go ahead and take a quick break here on the Rip City Drive. When we come back, we'll be welcoming on TJ Mathewson from the Marine Layer podcast here on the Rip City Drive, talking everything Mariners. You've got the Rip City Drive.
Swung on, clubbed, left field. Sheets is back. He's at the wall. It is gone into the Mariners bullpen. A 3-run home run, number 42 on the season, and the Mariners lead 4-0.
Welcoming you back to the Rip City Drive here on a Thursday afternoon. Brendan Slaughter here with you. Our next guest runs the Marine Layer podcast up in Seattle, covering the Mariners, and is one of my good friends, TJ Mathewson, back here on the Rip City Drive. TJ, what's going on, my brother? How are you?
Buddy, it is good to hear your voice again. How are you?
Oh man, it's busy time, like something I'm sure you can relate to, absolutely. But busy is good, and I was just telling my guest this week, TJ, it's my best and least favorite time of the year all at once because on one hand, it's end of August. We know summer's wrapping up. I love the Pacific Northwest summers; they are unmatched. I know you also got a little taste of that getting out river floating this year, so you know. But then on the other hand, we've got, everything that comes in the fall, obviously baseball, football, just everything that comes in. So I'm kind of torn, but I'm getting ready for the stretch run of sports.
Maybe this is just me being out of the loop and having changed my life a little bit in the last year. I didn't even realize, Brendan, as you talk about the time of year, that college football starts this weekend.
Oh.
Every single day covering Oregon State football for 4 seasons, and now that I'm not, until mid last week, Brendan, I'm going to be completely honest, it has been so baseball focused. I had no idea it was about to be opening week.
Oh, I couldn't even imagine, my friend, because again, folks, if you're a Mariners fan, you need to be dialed into the Marine Layer podcast because I catch as much of your stuff, TJ, as my bandwidth will allow, because in the same way that you haven't been able to focus in on college football with me getting ready for fall camp and everything that's come through, I've kind of only been able to just keep an eye on the Mariners as much as I can, but your guys' coverage has been fantastic, and again, would highly encourage everyone to check out the Marine Layer podcast. But man, just start with the vibes, TJ. It has to have been a fun summer. It looks like you and Lyle at Marine Layer have been staying super busy. It's been a fun season. Just kind of what are your thoughts here early on?
I guess it depends what time you checked in on the vibes of the team. You can even break it down to this month. You had the trade deadline itself, which was great. It went about as well as humanly possible for the Mariners. You had that first 10-game homestand where they went, or 11-game homestand where they went 9-2 on that homestand, 10-game homestand went 9-1, and everyone was on the moon. It's World Series. They had the best odds in the American League to make it to the World Series. People don't know what to do with themselves because that's not supposed to be true. And then they go on the road and then they just get slapped around by the Mets, the Orioles, and the Phillies. And then the vibes are back down. And then they come back home and they have a great homestand and people are feeling back up again. It really has been a roller coaster. This team has been inconsistent for a lot of this season. I think I was hoping that the trade deadline acquisitions would stabilize things a little bit. And I would say for the most part in the eye test, they feel a lot better. They're more talented. They're more complete. They plugged a lot of holes. But some of the inconsistencies are still there. And with just a couple more road trips remaining this season, I believe off the top of my head, they have 3 more to go. They got to, keep their eyes open to or 2 more road trips to go. They got to keep their eyes open on focusing and getting a couple of good road trips in here. And that will make people feel a lot better and the vibe's a little bit more consistent.
Catching up with TJ Mathewson of the Marine Layer podcast here on the Rip City Drives. Well, TJ, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't start with Cal Raleigh. And the floor is yours after we go ahead and quickly play home run number 50 once again.
The 3-2 on the way to Cal. Swinging a well-hit ball deep to left field. Head into the upper deck. Stay fair. Upper deck. Goodbye baseball. Number 50 for Cal Raleigh. He becomes one of only 33 members of the 50 home run club. And he reaches the upper deck like he did with home run number 48 yesterday. 49 he crushed off the out-of-town scoreboard. And the magical season just continues for Cal Raleigh. Holy smokes, what a shot.
How excited were you when that went down, TJ?
I was pretty excited. It takes a little bit longer to soak in the true meaning of 50. So after the fact, you're sort of realizing who he stands amongst. I mean, we're talking about some of the greatest players ever that have hit 50 home runs. Riz mentioned it. It's only, 33, 32 members of the 50 home run club. There's never been a catcher that has hit 50 home runs. He's just blowing every expectation out of the water, and he did it all before September started. And you realize when you look at it, the next records he is looking to break, you have to sort of shake your head when you read these records, are records by Mickey Mantle, Ken Griffey Jr., and Aaron Judge, 3 Hall of Famers right there. That's kind of crazy. I don't know where the Mariners would be without Cal Raleigh this season. Again, they're talented. I don't think they're where they are right now without Cal and the historic season they were getting. I'm sure Cal thought he was going to do better this season. I'm sure the Mariners thought he was going to improve this season. He's entering his physical prime. He's entering the prime of what most baseball players have offensively with bat speed and endurance and just the ability to stay bat on ball for most of the season. But what we're seeing is something we're probably never seeing again. I would be shocked if Cal Raleigh even sniffed where he's going to finish this season. He's going to hit at least 58 home runs, I'm going to guess.
Wow.
He's got 28 games left. He needs to hit 8 home runs in 28 games. That's one every 4 games to break Mickey Mantle's record, to break Ken Griffey Jr.'s record. And if he wants to get to Aaron Judge, it's like one every 3 games, which is not impossible when I read to you. You know, they're going to go out into the road and play in Cleveland, and Cleveland is a pretty decent home run hitting park. They're going to go play in Tampa. Tampa gave up 9 home runs in a game to the Yankees earlier this year. The Braves is a solid home run hitting park. He's hit incredibly well at home this season, in which he has 12 more games at home, or I can't do math, 2 more homestands left. And then he goes and plays in Houston and Kansas City to finish. He just needs 1 hot month left. Can he hold off the wear and tear of what usually happens with catchers during the season for 1 final strong month to finish the season and etch his name in the history books? His season's already going to be in Cooperstown. They'll give him a display somewhere, but he has a chance to really solidify that here in these next few weeks.
Catching up with TJ Matthewson from the Marine Layer podcast. I'm kind of curious, TJ, just how much has Cal, I think when I was texting you, just how much is like Cal Mania taken over Seattle, and how much of an icon has he become for that city just with this season? It just seems like he is kind of him and that trident, that picture is just everywhere, which it has to be amazing for, exposure.
Some people might roll their eyes at this. And I'll speak at this from personal experience talking to Cal. And he has the stature. He's famous. He's got all these home runs. He signed a nearly over $100 million extension this offseason. He's a one percenter. He's famous. He's a celebrity, et cetera, all of this. Talking to the dude, he might be the most relatable guy to you or I. I'm serious. If you go and
I love that.
Have a conversation with Cal, he's about as genuine and down to earth as you can get as a person. And I think that makes him very popular. It's almost like the understated nature of his personality makes him significantly more likable to a lot of people than let's draw the Julio comparison here. And this isn't even saying anything bad about Julio's personality. They just have different personalities. Julio's a little bit more expressive. He got out of the gates a lot faster. He got his face he got Julio's, a cereal out there. He was marketed nationally by Major League Baseball. He had all this flash and this flair, and he was always smiling doing this. And baseball is a very traditional sport. Smiling wasn't even allowed 15 years ago in the game. So when you have someone like that coming along and doing that, whether or not Julio has any control over it, and I certainly disagree with it. I love that Julio has fun. It does rub people the wrong way. But think of who your dad's favorite player would be. It would be someone who goes out there and grinds and is just stoic, everyday champion like Cal Raleigh is. Just the understated, consummate baseball player is, I think, the best way to put it. And Brennan, he has the most popular nickname in all of Major League Baseball. That helps.
I mean, it does. I mean, and one thing, TJ, I was going to mention to you that I thought you'd appreciate on air is here in a couple months, I'm going to be an uncle, and my brother-in-law and sister have decided they're going to name their son Callan. But my brother-in-law, who is a pretty big Mariner fan, pretty okay with Cal for a nickname for short. So I just wonder. I told him, I'm like, you might not be alone with the kind of season that's going down, TJ.
Was that on purpose?
So it kind of ended up being a double whammy. So Callan has a kind of a relation to my sister, something she wanted to name, and then shortening it to Cal. My brother-in-law's like, hey, I'm kind of a big Mariners fan, Cal. So it's all kind of just come together kind of naturally, which I thought was kind of cool. And then obviously, as he's continued to have this season, we've all kind of joked in our family group chat like little big dumpers coming, which is kind of funny.
Well, I'm glad that works out for them. I don't think they're alone in that camp.
No, and that's why I just had to ask, because it's like once again just Cal Mania taking over. But catching up with TJ Mathewson here on the Rip City Drive. TJ, appreciate your time. Just kind of continuing on a couple more things Cal related. Is he the favorite for MVP at this moment, and do you think he ultimately gets it this year?
I think the record breaking is really going to help him out a lot. I'd say right this very second, he would get a slight edge over Aaron Judge. It would be a toss-up, though. Like I would give him a slight edge, but you never know with the voters. There could be some scattered votes out there for Judge. First place points, second place points, third place points, all this kind of stuff that stacks up. I think people are starting to understand how hard it is to catch and do what Cal's doing. I really think people are sitting there and understanding that the toll that it takes on you is a lot harder than what Judge is doing. Let me say this about Aaron Judge. He is having a better offensive season on a rate basis than Cal Raleigh. But if there's one normalized stat that everyone loves besides batting average, it's home runs and RBIs. And what does Cal have? He has exactly that. And then Cal can make his pitch to other people and say, yeah, not only am I catching every day and I switch hit, but I'm breaking records from Ken Griffey Jr. and Mickey Mantle. And if, say, Brendan, he breaks Judge's record in a season while he has to catch, that's one of the best storylines ever. And sometimes they give the MVP to the storyline rather than the best overall player. I will say this about September. If Cal does what he's done since July 1st, which has been good, he's been about standard Cal Raleigh before this season, maybe a little bit worse, since July 1st, and Aaron Judge goes off, Aaron Judge will win the MVP. If they both do what they've been doing the last month or so, it's going to be really, really close. If Cal goes off and gets 63, then I would give him the award, and I think he would have well earned it.
Catching up with TJ Mathewson here on the Rip City Drive. You mentioned the additions at the deadline, and obviously Eugenio Suarez, Josh Naylor to the mix. So what do you think those guys have brought, TJ? You said maybe not quite as stabilizing as you thought. Do you think there's still more of a runway for those guys to kind of stabilize things a little bit?
I wouldn't even okay, maybe not singling them out's the wrong word, because they were the two big additions at the deadline. And they both performed well since they've gotten there. Gino the last week has been awesome. He's had a 3-run homer in back-to-back days. Josh Naylor stealing bases and slugging homers and bringing great energy, and everyone in the clubhouse loves him. So they've done what they're supposed to do. But, Brendan, more what I mean by the inconsistency is you just look since the deadline. I was just writing some numbers down for our episode that we're going to tape later. Since the trade deadline, the lineup is 15th in runs or 18th in on-base percentage, 17th in slug, 14th in weighted runs created plus. Those numbers aren't reflective of the talent in the lineup. Like, I look at every player and I say this player is either playing at or above where they should be over that stretch, and yet they're still bottom half of the league in offense. That part to me does not make much sense. I think what is tied into that is they've been a little streaky. They've shown what they could be, but the streakiness kind of gets to them a little bit, and some of these cold streaks make them a little bit more susceptible to not performing up to standard. And just think about Gino. Gino this season has taken a lot less walks, and he's been hitting a lot more home runs. What does that make about your game? It means you're probably a little bit more streaky. He was streaky here in Seattle, and I think he's even more streaky now than he was in his first stint in Seattle, because he doesn't really have anything else to offset it. It's home run, extra base hit, or not much else.
TJ Mathewson here on the Rip City Drive. Just a couple more things for you, TJ. Who else have been some of your favorite standouts from this year's squad? Who have you really enjoyed seeing play this year and kind of developing?
We've been a big proponent of Cole Young. Cole Young started the year in the minors, spent about 2 months in Tacoma. 1 month he struggled. The next month he crushed it. And now he's been up at the big league level, and he's been the Mariners every day, pretty much, starting second baseman, a position that they've not been able to fill since Robinson Cano left after the 2018 season. And not only have they not filled that position, the position has been awful. It's been some of the worst baseball I've seen played at that second base position. And Cole Young's come in, and he's really stabilized it. He's not been out of this world offensively in his rookie season, but he's only 21 years old, just turned 22. He can hit both lefties and righties as a left-handed hitter. Despite the fact he's not the biggest and most imposing player on the field, he crushes the ball. Watching this guy take batting practice and watch him let loose on a swing, he'll crush them into the second deck pretty easily. That's the kind of power that guys a lot bigger than him usually show, and he's showing it as someone who stands about 6 feet tall, but not this overwhelming muscular presence in the batter's box. But it doesn't matter because he's got such a great swing that generates so much power. He's got a really good eye at the plate. He walks about as much as he strikes out. And overall, he's been such a valuable piece in that lineup. It's great not having to worry about second base anymore.
Let's talk a little bit about the pitching, TJ. I saw you guys recently highlighting the Mariners bullpen on social media. Talk a little bit about that bullpen.
The bullpen is I'd say the biggest X factor down the stretch. I know the rotation is talented. That at least I can lean back on. The bullpen does not have that same level of top-line talent front to back as the starting rotation does, and that's what makes me a little nervous. When a Mariners pitcher, as they have so often this season, doesn't pitch quite as deep into games, the 5th, 6th, and sometimes the 7th inning have been a problem for the Mariners. They have 3 top-line leverage arms at the back, and Munoz, Brash, and Gabe Spire. After that, it is some inconsistent arms that they have to fill those other areas of need. And it makes me a little bit nervous sometimes watching them try to hold a lead. Some of it has been the rotation's fault because the rotation has not pitched as well this season and therefore has overexposed their bullpen. Some of it has just been the bullpen has not performed up to standard. There were some guys they were hoping to get leverage outs this year that they haven't gotten much production from at all. A couple names to mention is Gregory Santos, who they traded for from the White Sox prior to the 2024 season. He was supposed to be not quite Munoz, but 80% of Andres Munoz in the Mariners bullpen. He's thrown like 10 combined innings in 2 seasons. Has been hurt. He went like 36 batters at the beginning of the season, Brendan, and didn't strike out a single one. He throws 100 miles an hour, and he couldn't strike one of 40 batters out, which blew my mind.
Yeah.
And then Troy Taylor dominated the minor leagues, came up last year as a 23-year-old, straight from Double-A, performed well in the Mariners bullpen in the final month-ish of the season last year, came up to the big leagues this year and just did not have it. And he's been in the minor leagues ever since. He's dealt with some injuries as well. Those are just 2 guys. It's been really disappointing that softer part of the bullpen where you need the outs in the middle innings. They really haven't been able to get the production from that. And it could be a reason, if they are to miss the playoffs, that it would be the bullpen's fault.
Let's kind of dive into, TJ, the schedule down the stretch. And obviously, as we sit right now, the Mariners are in the wild card picture. They trail the Astros by, I think it was a game and a half when I looked, 2 games now. But what do you think that division title will shake out? Obviously, 2 games is, doable for the Mariners down the stretch. They got, I believe, 1 more series with the Astros. How do you see that battle shaking out?
I think they can win the division. I think if I were to put, God, I'm not going to put money down because the team always lets me down. But I would say I feel good about the division. The Astros, I really don't buy. I don't buy their roster at all. They've had so many injuries. Their pitching staff is really good. Despite those injuries, I just can't buy the lineup at all. The wild card is shaken out pretty favorably for the Mariners. They can take care of all the business they need to on their final road trip of the season. Kansas City's the team behind them in the wild card. Houston's the team ahead of them in the division, as you know. The Mariners have 3 games in Kansas City, that second to final week of the season, and then they have 3 in Houston against the Astros in their final road series of the season. If they go 4-2 on that road trip, that's a lot of ground to gain on both of them. And if they go to Kansas City and they win the series, that essentially knocks the Royals out of playoff contention if they don't knock themselves out before then. The Astros is a little bit trickier because the Astros have a pretty easy strength of schedule down the stretch. They're playing the Rockies right now. Who would have thought that definitely helps them out. Now the Mariners also get to play the Rockies as well the week after that road trip ends. So it works out. Really, once they get past this weekend in Cleveland, and Cleveland's been really struggling lately, they have series against the Rays, who they just swept at home. Braves are bad. Cardinals are bad. Angels are bad. You have those 2 contenders on the road, and then you have the Rockies. And then they close the season against the Dodgers. The Dodgers are very intimidating to me. I don't think the Mariners have beaten the Dodgers in a series the last 5 years, off the top of my head.
Okay, yeah.
I'm hoping they get to that final weekend and it doesn't matter at all, and they're already clinched by then.
Just last thing for you, TJ. Obviously, you mentioned it earlier when you were talking about the vibes, but like straight up, take off the marine colored glasses. Do you think this team has the pieces to make a World Series push this year? And then, of course, you could give me the optimistic answer too.
Yes, they do. With a rotation like this and the talent they have in the lineup, if they make the playoffs, the expectations for Mariners fans should be that they can make the World Series. The other teams in the American League are not world beaters this year. Your rotation stacks up against everyone's rotation. Your lineup stacks up against everyone's lineup. Again, the bullpen I worry about, but in the playoffs, you can move starters to the bullpen. You can shrink who you use in the bullpen and shrink it down to like 4 different arms you throw that you actually trust. And you can make it all the way by just doing that. So, yeah, Brendan, I do think they can make the World Series.
It's definitely exciting. And, it's like I said, TJ, I'm obviously thrilled that you guys are doing so well up there in Seattle. But I was just telling Ryan Harlan the other day, I'm like, it's going to be weird not having TJ down at Reser Stadium when we kick off the gang again this Saturday, man. You will be missed, but I know you're doing big things up in Seattle, man, and I'm thrilled for you, brother.
Thank you, Brendan. I appreciate it. I miss you guys down there, but I am very happy to be up here.
Absolutely. He's TJ Mathewson. You can check him out at the Marine Layer podcast. TJ, appreciate your time, my friend. Enjoy the rest of the season, and we'll catch up sometime down the line, my friend.
Sounds good, Brendan. Thank you.
TJ Mathewson, the Marine Layer podcast here on the Rip City Drive, talking everything Mariners. And hear that, Mariner fans? World Series could be within reach this year. I know there's a lot of begrudgingly, sad Mariner fans who have been disappointed throughout the year, so maybe they can get excited over this. I mean, I don't disagree. I think they got a strong squad. I agree with his assessment that the AL is open, and, you never know, right? That's why you got to get out there and play baseball. How great it is. All right, we'll take a quick break here on the Rip City Drive. When we come back, we'll be getting you ready for hour number 2 here on a Thursday. Welcoming you back to the Rip City Drive here on a Thursday afternoon. Almost said Tuesday. Wrong T-letter word there, Brennan. Thursday afternoon as we get you ready for the start of the college football season. Again, a quick update on the Boise State and UCF game that's currently going on. USF, I should say, just took a 10-7 lead over the Broncos with 6:34 in the second quarter. So number 25 Boise State getting tested down in South Florida. Again, a very interesting kickoff time for this game. It was 2:30 here on the West Coast, and it's definitely an interesting start for a pretty good team in Boise, who they think is going to be pretty solid still this year with Maddox Madsen and company. But the Bulls definitely got them on the ropes so far. But nevertheless, here, just a couple minutes in this segment before we get you ready for hour number 2, and obviously Cam Meller and the big discussion we'll have coming up at the top of the hour talking about NFL. There's a story ESPN wrote with X Factors for all 32 teams, and we're going to go ahead and run through that at the top of the hour. But something I wanted to mention here, leave it to Dion. Dion always finds a way to have himself in the news, right? And this is something he said today that I thought was kind of interesting. So Deion Sanders pitches bonus for players in the college football playoffs. So Dion has come up and pitched the idea that players should be paid for making the college football playoff and paying them even more when their teams win. The Colorado coach said if they do that, then, quote, now it's equality, now it's even, and every player is making the same amount of money. So, can't say it's something that the college football playoff has, endorsed fully, but usually when Dion says something, it starts to make its way through the college football, radio waves, so to speak. And it wouldn't surprise me with where we are with college football now. I mean, dare I say, how long before we're in the situation where a college football quarterback, after a big loss or something, is like, yeah, no, I'm not going to go to the press conference unless, I get financial gain from that, right? Or, what's in it for me kind of a thing. We are in such a new world of college football where there is so much money being thrown around, and dare I say, it's not necessarily equitable. We ran through earlier this week the going rate for what quarterbacks make versus offensive linemen, and it's not flat across the board. And it's going to be interesting to continue to see how this ultimately shakes itself out, because these moves, college football is just growing closer and closer and closer towards the NFL. And the more that happens, the more that the things that made the college game great, I think, might be, lost a little bit. And ultimately, we'll see what happens. But I just, it's tough because, you can just tell that college football is entirely a business now. And I'm still young enough or old enough, whatever it is, to remember when it wasn't quite this way. And I know a lot of people, don't necessarily love this new world of college football, but it is what it is. You got to be willing to adapt and, make the adjustments as necessary and move on as a program, or, kind of get left behind. So here we are. We'll see what happens if ultimately players start getting bonuses for winning the college football playoff. We'll see. You've got the Rip City Drive with Brendan Slaughter. When we come back, hour number 2 here on a Thursday. What's going on, Rip City? Brendan Slaughter here for the Rip City Drive. Micah Parsons is officially a Green Bay Packer as Jerry Jones traded his star linebacker amid a contract dispute. He will sign a 4-year, $188 million deal with the Pack, while Dallas gets defensive tackle Kenny Clark and 2 first-round picks. Parsons' deal includes $120 million guaranteed at signing, $136 total in guarantees, the highest non-quarterback deal in NFL history. Oregon State football kicks off the season Saturday night against the Cal Bears at 7:30 at Reser, while the Oregon Ducks host Montana State at Autzen Stadium at 1 o'clock. Coming up here on the big show, we'll be catching up with Pro Football Sports Network Chief Analytics Officer Cam Mellor and Oregon State radio voice Mike Parker here on the big show. You've got the Rip City Drive on a Thursday. Rip City Drive here on a Thursday afternoon, 4 o'clock here in the big Rose City. Hope everyone's having a great Thursday so far. Checking in on college football action. The South Florida Bulls are still leading Boise State 10-7. That game back and forth. Boise State looked like they had an opportunity to tie the game up, but had a fumble down in the red zone that the Bulls took advantage of. But they were just stopped around midfield and will be forced to punt back to Boise State. But a better game from the Bulls, and Boise looking maybe a little bit mortal without Ashton Genty there in the backfield. So we'll be keeping tabs on that game as well as we get you ready for the rest of the show and ultimately the rest of college football starting on this weekend. But we're going to zero in on the NFL this segment, and ESPN came out with a story. It was ranking, or not ranking, but just key X factors for all 32 teams. And I wanted to run through this list because I thought it was pretty cool just to kind of see ultimately how it shook out. But long story short, ESPN just gives one player from each team that they think is an X factor this year. We're going to go ahead and run through that real quick. So starting in the NFC West, Arizona Cardinals, they have their edge, Josh Sweat, as their as their X factor going into this year. Talked about how Sweat's best season in the NFL came under then defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon with the Eagles in 2022. They're hoping he can get the most out of him this year. The Los Angeles Rams, Devontae Adams obviously comes on over after spending the last season with the New York Jets. And this is interesting because, Devontae's obviously going to be a star receiver there, but I'm curious to see ultimately what happens with Matt Stafford and his health and whether or not we're going to be seeing more of the Jimmy Garoppolo show. But nevertheless, even if we do, I agree with that one. I think Devontae's going to be seeing a lot of targets, but I would almost say Puka Nacua might be slightly more important for the Rams. 49ers also going wide receiver here, Ricky Pearsall. And again, you think about Brandon Ayuk not being around, Deebo Samuel now on the Commanders. This makes some sense. The former Florida wide receiver. I definitely remember him being a big part of Florida's offense when Oregon State played them in the Vegas Bowl a couple of years back. Speedster, can do a little bit of everything. And considering how Kyle Shanahan likes to get guys, guys with the ball in space and be able to use their kind of gifts. So I think that's pretty accurate as well. Moving down to the Seattle Seahawks. Running back Kenneth Walker. This I would definitely agree with. I think you could have went with, potentially Jackson Smith and Jigba here because I think he's going to be primed for a big season out wide at receiver for the Seahawks. But Kenny Walker, he has been a pretty consistent force since coming to the Seahawks after starring at Michigan State. He's shown what he can do, and I think the biggest thing for him is just staying healthy. As he hasn't had 1,000 yards since his rookie year. If he could get back to that in Clint Kubiak's offense now, a new offense under Mike McDonald. So we'll keep an eye on that for as well. But Kenneth Walker, the X factor for the Seahawks. Moving over to the NFC East, the Cowboys, wide receiver George Pickens. This one's really interesting to me. The Cowboys took a calculated risk on George Pickens after things didn't quite work out and were, dare I say, I think he kind of got the diva label a little bit in Pittsburgh. It didn't really work out between him and Mike Tomlin. He goes to Dallas. Dallas has been known to be able to kind of rehabilitate guys, get the most out of guys. If he can show the talent that we all know is there, that could be dangerous. Moving on along in the NFC East, the Giants, they go with cornerback Paulson Adebo, the former Stanford Cardinal. Philadelphia Eagles, defensive tackle Moro Ojomo. Again, they're kind of just listing who's kind of next man up in the Eagles defensive line rotation. Again, said he had a really good year this last year. Will continue that strong defense down in the middle for the Eagles. And then to wrap up the NFC East, wide receiver Deebo Samuel. And again, Deebo's one of those things one of those players that I think if he can stay healthy, which is a big if, Deebo is still one of those guys who can be in the backfield, a receiver, a real interesting gadget kind of player for Jaden Daniels to have. And now that he's got Terry McLaurin back, that could be interesting. So they think Deebo could be the X factor there. Moving right along to the Chicago Bears in the NFC North, they've got offensive tackle Braxton Jones. You're talking about how much Caleb Williams was sacked last year. Anyone on the offensive line has got to be welcomed to Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson in that group. So not surprised they went there. I think Rome Odunze could have been a potential X factor as well. For the Lions, also go defensive back with Terry and Arnold. Green Bay Packers, edge Rashawn Gary. Dare I say this was written before Micah Parsons was traded? I think it's very safe to say that Green Bay's X factor this year is Micah Parsons, and he's going to be able to do some big-time things for the Pack this year. Moving right along here on the list, up to Minnesota. Safety Theo Jackson is the Vikings X factor per this list. Again, he had a big season this year ago, and obviously he left. He had a big year this last year playing in Brian Flores' defense. He was, and it's going to be very interesting to see what he can do for the Vikings as well. Moving right along, the Falcons defensive tackle Rook Orohoro. Hopefully, I'm getting that right. Again, another defensive tackle that they think is going to make a leap to relevance this season. The Panthers, edge DJ Wonnum. Again, another player they think is going to make a bit of a jump as his last season with Carolina was last year. New Orleans Saints go with guard Trevor Penning. You talk about New Orleans kind of rebuilding things on the fly this year and over the next couple years and rebuilding the offensive line. Their right side looks pretty good, obviously anchored by Talise Fuaga, the former Oregon State Beaver at right tackle. Guard Cesar Ruiz has been solid. Center Eric McCoy. Now you just got to see if that left side can continue to develop as well for what the New Orleans Saints will ultimately be throwing out there this year, which is going to be Alvin Kamara and a bunch of rookie quarterbacks for the Saints this year. So that'll be interesting as well. Moving right along, linebacker Sovoshia Dennis for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Not super familiar with Dennis, but again, somebody who they think is going to star for the Buccaneers this year. Moving to the AFC West, Denver Broncos, they pegged cornerback Riley Moss. He was only one of 3 outside corners with at least 200 snaps last season. And I'm curious to kind of see ultimately what happens as he's going to be opposite of Patrick Surtain, as it mentions here. He needs to be better for the Broncos this next year, and it's going to be interesting to see how they do as well. Kansas City, they label safety Jaden Hicks as the Chiefs' X factor, which I think you could go a million different ways with the Chiefs. I mean, you could go with you just have lots of different options. I mean, I think even Mahomes, you go with Kelsey in a bounce back year. You could go with Hollywood Brown, their receivers, but I think more on the defensive side. He's going to be stepping into Justin Reed's shoes down or there on the back end. So the Chiefs will definitely be hoping for a lot from him. Continuing along, Jordan Meredith for the Las Vegas Raiders, and it's going to be interesting to see. They've got him pegged to be the starting center for the Raiders this year, moving over Jackson Powers Johnson to right guard, the former Oregon Ducks. So we'll see. I'm interested to see what the Raiders going to do this season with Pete Carroll, Chip Kelly, Ashton Genty, and Geno Smith in that squad. I think it's going to be very interesting. Moving along, the Chargers edge, Tui Peloto. I'm going to hope I got that close. He had 8.5 sacks this last season. Definitely going to be key for the Chargers, opposite of opposite of Bud Dupree. But that'll be interesting to see what happens there for the Chargers. Elsewhere in the AFC East, Keon Coleman is listed as the X factor for the Buffalo Bills. I could definitely see that. I think Coleman, Khalil Shakir, you kind of need somebody else to step up and be a consistent pass-catching target for Josh Allen. So I see that as well. Miami down elsewhere in the AFC East. Storm Ducks, cornerback. It's kind of interesting. This continues to say that Storm Duck might be one of the interesting names in the NFL, but he's going to be, play a key role in the Dolphins secondary. The New England Patriots, Stephon Diggs. Very excited to see what Diggs can do with quarterback Drake May. I think that's going to be, the best way the Patriots can kind of be relevant is have more pass catching targets for Diggs. For May, I think we've seen some growth from Drake so far in his professional career. Elsewhere, the New York Jets running back Breece Hall. This is interesting because, man, at one point, Breece Hall was one of the best and promising young running backs in the NFL. He obviously has a ACL injury, hasn't quite been the same player since, but nevertheless, the talent was at one point there. I'd like to see him get healthy and, contribute to that team this year. Moving along to the AFC North, the Ravens, they've got Trenton Simpson, their linebacker. Again, just, you talk about the Baltimore Ravens playing strong defense, just another linebacker in John Harbaugh's system, that will probably succeed. Cincinnati Bengals, they highlight cornerback Cam Taylor-Britt. It's going to be interesting to see what kind of a year Britt has as, the Bengals this last year, they made an overhaul at defensive coordinator, brought in Al Golden after firing their longtime defensive coordinator, including the one that was so successful when they went to the Super Bowl a few years back. So we'll see ultimately what he can do. Cleveland Browns edge Alex Wright, Pittsburgh Steelers offensive tackle Broderick Jones. In the NFC South, Nick Chubb at running back for the Texans, considering Joe Mixon's going to be out for a little while. We could see Nick Chubb, potentially be what he was in Cleveland. Problem with Nick Chubb is it's the health. We haven't seen it consistently. Moving along, the Indianapolis Colts, Tanner Bortolini, center, is going to be who they highlight for the Colts. Offensive tackle Anton Harrison for the Jaguars. Tennessee Titans quarterback L'Jarius Sneed is ultimately what wraps up that list. So X factors for all 32 teams. There you can find that full story at ESPN, the breakdown on each player. But some I agree with, some not so much. Some we'll wait and see, but definitely curious on some. We'll go ahead and take a quick break here on the Rip City Drive. When we come back, we'll be catching up with Cam Mellor, getting his thoughts on everything college football, maybe even a few pro thoughts as well, as Micah Parsons has dominated things today. You've got the Rip City Drive on a Thursday. Welcoming you back to the Rip City Drive here on a Thursday afternoon. Brendan Slaughter here with you. We're pleased to be joined by the Chief Analytics Officer for PFSN, Cam Miller, on the program. Cam, long time no talk, my friend. How's the summer treating you, getting ready for the start of the football season?
Summer was good. Football season is significantly better, and no better way than honestly like this Thursday night appetizer for the 5-day street here of football.
Oh, absolutely, and I definitely want to focus mostly on college football during our chat today, Cam. But I think I'd be remiss if I didn't, gloss over the biggest news, and that's Micah Parsons being traded from the Cowboys to the Packers. Just your first reaction to that news? I certainly didn't see it coming.
I didn't see it coming, and I look back at other trades that's sort of in the same vein. There's not really one except for the Khalil Mack trade, and if you look at it that way, and if you look at the fact that the Jets also got 2 first rounds for an aging Jamal Adams, and we saw how that has turned out, it looks as if the Cowboys and Jerry Jones got fleeced, I think the kids would say. And so I think the data backs it up. You should have paid your big man. You should have kept him happy. He's the cornerstone of your defense, arguably the best defensive player in the entire league. And so to me, to let him go and to be wrong from the jump, put the shoes on, or put the ball in the court of Micah Parsons, and here we are. The Cowboys come out not looking too good.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely have to agree. I mean, again, I think Kenny Clark's a fine player. I think 2 first-round picks is fine, but when you're just talking about the generational Canton-bound talent that Micah Parsons is, like just seeing like his highlights run across SportsCenter, I'm just like, yeah, you kind of, he's one effective dude, Cam.
Yeah, no, I saw a couple of lines move as well, and I think if you understand betting and you know a quarterback is maybe going to move a betting line 1-2 points depending on the quarterback itself. Micah Parsons moved the betting line. There's no other defender in the league that's going to do that, and I think that sums up the value in which he had Canton, first ballot test guy. Absolutely, if everything goes to plan here, I don't see why not. And hopefully for us, he gets like 30 sacks, and we all get to sit here watching greatness unfold this season.
Absolutely. And again, just last thing on that before we get into college, did you see I am a little surprised it was the Packers who got in on the mix and were like, yeah, we're more than happy to pay Micah what he wants and all those things. Were there other offers, do you think, or do you think this is just the one that the Cowboys like the most, for lack of better terms?
To me, it's a little shocking that it's the Packers. They hate each other, right? These franchises have to hate each other. They've been bred to hate each other since the dawn of the actual NFL. And so, no, to me, it's shocking that they're the team that they decided to pull the trigger with. And so, to me, maybe that's the best offer that they got at that point. Or maybe that was the only one, and there's an in that somewhere Jerry Jones knows somebody they're talking to up there. To me, I don't get it. I get it what they did for the Packers standpoint. I like what they have, obviously, on defense now, even better. And so in a competitive NFC North, it's sort of wide open now at this point.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see. Catching up with Cam Miller here on the Rip City Drive. Let's dive right on into college, Cam. You mentioned the appetizer we got today, Boise and USF underway, and obviously that game at halftime with USF holding a 10-7 lead. It's obviously week one overreactions, Cam. We're here for it, but I don't know if too many people pegged USF being able to play them tough. What do you think of that game so far?
Yeah, it's a local time of 2:30 kick in the heat and humidity that is Tampa down there. And so to me, I was a little nervous for them going down there. I think, I do trust Spencer Danielson to sort of right the ship in the second half. A couple of, early errors to me, but no, Byron Brown is still the dynamic athlete that we saw. It was only for 4 games last year before he was out with injury. He's back. He's healthy. I think he proved it when he ran over the defender going in for a touchdown. He could have gone untouched, but to me, Byron Brown gives that team a chance to win any game that they're in just because of how athletic he is. So if he can stay healthy and keep doing what he's doing, Boise should be or could be in trouble here.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting game to see down the stretch. Again, like you mentioned, the 2:30 kickoff time, especially like I'm on the West Coast. I'm preparing for today's show, Cam, and I'm like, oh, man, we're going to be at halftime by the time I'm talking to Cam about that game. Just an interesting time. And you said in Tampa with the heat and everything else. We'll definitely be keeping close tabs on that game. But the far from the only intriguing game this weekend, Cam, and there's really 3 that I think are super, super marquee, starting with Texas, Ohio State, then LSU, Clemson, and then Notre Dame, Miami on Sunday. Pretty good lineup as far as top 25 matchups. Which one of those are kind of your one you're watching, or do you think all 3 of them are going to have their own kind of unique intrigue?
Yeah, I think they'll all have their own unique intrigue. I think because I can also find interest in Bethune-Cookman at Florida International tomorrow afternoon. So to me, I'm probably the worst person to possibly ask that question, but absolutely, I think those three you start at noon on Saturday, and you look and see, yes, these are two blue blood programs ushering in a brand new quarterback. They've both been around the team for a little bit of time. Obviously, Arch Manning a little bit longer, but to me, how quickly they adapt to week one. We're going to see a couple of week one errors, but on defense, maybe we don't because the defenses are returning a great sum of all their parts on both sides of the ball. So Arch Manning's got it in for him. Hostile environment, noon in Columbus. I live here in Columbus. I know how hostile it'll be for him, but also Caleb Downs, the best defensive player in the entire country, is going to be back there roaming the safeties as free safety. So to me, what each of those offenses look like and how quickly those quarterbacks adapt and then start to play out of the structured offense of those first 15 to 40 plays and how well they break down after that.
Catching up with Cam Meller here on the Rip City Drive. Cam, appreciate your time. Obviously, you mentioned a couple quarterbacks there. Who do you think are like some of your top quarterbacks that you really want to see play this year? Are you excited for, obviously Arch Manning, more John Mateer at Oklahoma? Who's really got you excited this year at the quarterback spot?
Yeah, it's Mateer, obviously. I think you can't not love what he was able to do last year, coming out of nowhere. It was a quote unquote battle out of camp last year for him, and then look what he did, and then obviously how much he's sort of taken Oklahoma on his back. But I don't want to go chalk and say I want to see those draft quarterbacks, but I do really want to see what we're probably not going to see a whole lot of it as we get into week one. But what the quarterbacks that had high draft aspirations previously now look like coming back. A Drew Aller that everybody said he could have gone first or been the first quarterback this past season. What does he look like? Playing Nevada, maybe we don't get a whole lot of it. What does Carson Beck look like playing for Miami against the Notre Dame defense? And then to me, some of those other newer quarterbacks in some of these newer situations, Ty Simpson, Alabama's starting quarterback in Tallahassee at Florida State. So quite excited to see that one specifically at 3:30 on Saturday as well.
Arizona State leads your guys' Big 12 power rankings this season. How good of a year can we expect from Sam Leavitt, obviously a local guy we're familiar with here in Oregon, and the Sun Devils this year without Cam Scattaboo?
Yeah, it's, I love the addition. I love what Teddy Dillingham has been able to do in the portal over his entire very young career as a coach and coordinator. And they get Kanye from Army. We saw what he was able to do in that triple option offense. We saw he's been able to be sort of the bell cow and be the guy who takes the brunt of the hits. And so I think they maybe have found their Cam Scattaboo in the sense that not going to throw the ball 20 times in the game like Scattaboo was completely capable of, but he's absolutely sort of takes the not the importance but the brunt of a lot of the plays that maybe Sam Leavitt doesn't have to take. And then obviously Jordan Tyson returning. To me, Leavitt, contention for the Heisman. This is a dream season for them that I think absolutely he has the talent to do. So they just have to stay healthy and keep him protected in that pocket.
Catching up with Cam Meller here on the Rip City Drive. Cam, who do you think are maybe just a couple college football teams that you think are being slept on nationally right now? Like anybody you think who could maybe come out of left field and just catch some folks by surprise?
It's tough. It's hard to say. I do think Oklahoma has a chance to be a top 10 team overall. I know they have the benefit of being an 18, being an SEC team. I think Vanderbilt also has a chance with Diego Pavia, just being Diego Pavia, but Eli Stowers at tight end has a chance to sort of make some moves. But I'm going to go group of five, and I'm going to say a team that has a chance to potentially run the table with a schedule that they have at least in the Sun Belt, and if they get a couple of lucky breaks, you have the Southern Miss Golden Eagles, who were just a complete afterthought with everybody last year, previous 5 years, the Will Hall tenure. You have Charles Huff bringing the entire Marshall roster over and then bringing in other talented players. And a year in which we saw more group of five talent leave through the transfer portal than we have since the portal really became into existence, the Southern Miss Golden Eagles were able to bring in more players, to me, that have more value, more impact. And so I would not be surprised if we see Southern Miss contending, maybe not for that college football playoff spot, but being a team that comes out of nowhere as a group of five team to compete for the Sun Belt.
Interesting. If Southern Miss gets off to a hot start, I'm going to be tweeting at you, Cam, being like, Cam called it first, because that's definitely intriguing. And I'm always curious to see which kind of group of five team can, make a decent push towards those things. And just a couple more questions for you here on the Rip City Drive, Cam. Let's zero in here on the Pacific Northwest and us here locally. What are your expectations for Oregon this season as they kick off the year against Montana State and have kind of a new look roster?
I'm really excited to see those first 15 plays. I want to see how much they utilize Dante Moore. I want to see what sort of design run game can we get out of him, if any. how well that offensive line plays to their fullest potential. I think you have a lot of players that are incredibly talented, would have, I'd say, pretty high draft aspirations for most of them on that offensive line, if not every single one of them. How well can they play and mesh cohesively to start the season? And then, to me, can we finally see the Malik Benson breakout season that once had Nick Saban visiting him 3 different times as a junior college transfer before he went to Bama to Florida State? So I love what we can potentially see. And I said that I believe it was since maybe May. I think Mekhi Hughes could be the player that no one's talking about nationally that could contend for the Doak Walker Award if everything goes to plan. He's that talented.
Oh, absolutely. What Oregon was able to bring in with Mekhi Hughes at the running back transfer portal, I thought was particularly impressive. And I'm kind of curious what your expectations are. You mentioned Dante Moore there a little bit. Now that he had a year after, starting his career with Chip Kelly at UCLA and then moving to Oregon and spending last year behind Dylan Gabriel, another year he still seems like a little bit of an unknown in the sense of, the last time we saw him play with UCLA, it was kind of up and down. How much do you think he's grown for Oregon since?
Yeah, it's hard to say there was anybody better in college football of the past decade for him to learn behind than somebody like Dylan Gabriel, who's literally been around the block and come maybe multiple times been around the block. And obviously we were able to see what he was able to do last year. And, QB2 now for the Browns. No one thought so. And so to me, having him be his sort of mentor leader, I don't know how close they were. This is me as an outsider, I guess. You'd hope and you'd expect for him to have learned as much as possible. And there's going to be nobody better. And so we probably won't see it in week 1, but we'll absolutely be able to see, the trust, I think. We saw it. If you look back, you watched the game in Ireland, the Iowa State-Kansas State game, and afterwards there was a 4th down call that they went for, and they won the game for Iowa State. And, you interview Matt Campbell afterwards, and he says, Rocco Beck gives me all the confidence in the world to make those kind of calls. We probably don't see it in week 1, but maybe we do get a little hint of how much Dan Lanning trusts Dante Moore. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing that you can take out of these types of games is how much trust has he shown early, because that'll give us probably the best indicator of how he's been playing and how he's been performing.
Staying local, Oregon State, meanwhile, has an intriguing opening game with Cal at Reser Stadium this weekend, near even on the money line for that game. What are your thoughts on that matchup to open the year for the Beavs and Oregon State's new-look team with quarterback Malik Murphy now?
Yeah, there was a lot to like about Malik Murphy last year. There was also a lot that was left on the table, I think, with him as a pure passer. And I think it goes back to his time at Texas as well. Filling in for Cavaniers at one, I forget which game it was, early on. He missed multiple throws that were wide open throws. And then we saw it a little bit better last year. But to me, the name of the game with this offense for Oregon State is going to be trying to keep the ball out of his hands, keep the ball out of Murphy's hands and rely on that run game and that incredibly talented offensive line. It feels like they just completely reload every single year to me. And so if they can get a couple of fortuitous bounces, I don't necessarily know what we're going to get from Cal as well this year. So this is ripe to me for one of those games. It's a rightful pick-em just because we don't know a whole lot about it, but I'd give the benefit of the doubt to a guy like Malik Murphy, keeping the offense on schedule and then relying on that offensive line to sort of pave the way against Cal.
Absolutely. Catching up with Cam Miller. Just a couple more things for you here, Cam. Let's talk some Huskies. They obviously kick off the year against Colorado State. Jay Norvell's squads are always a little tougher than you expect. What are your expectations for Jed Fish's squad this year?
Yeah, I want to see a lot of what they can do, against Jay Norvell's team, what the secondary looks like. I don't think we usually have to worry about the secondary so much, but this is the team that you will have to worry about your secondary. And the fact that they're essentially got a gunslinger back there like Brett Favre. He's willing to throw it into every single tight angle, tight window throw. And so the corners are going to have a great game and be on their games from the jump. But what does this offense look like? We could probably see a little bit of it from practice and a little bit of it from tape and read what you can. But what does that offense truly look like when it gets into the game situation? And this is a game that I don't know if we're going to see the starters dumped by the second half. I think this is a game we're going to see them playing through all 4 quarters and have to, because I don't know if they can pull away yet. So I'd be pleasantly surprised, but Denzel Boston to me is the marquee guy for me to watch nationally. And if you don't know who he is nationally, you better now.
Catching up with Cam Miller here on the Rip City Drive. Just last thing for you, Cam, as we complete the Northwest Circuit here. It's a new time up in Pullman as Jake Dickert hit the ejector seat, went to Wake Forest after this year, entered Jimmy Rogers from South Dakota State. Just in my prep, he brought over, so many players from South Dakota State. What kind of rebuild do you think or retooling Washington State might have ahead of themselves this year? And do you like, Jimmy Rogers?
Yeah, I'm a fan of him and what he was able to do, obviously, at the FCS level. But as we've seen for a lot of these coaches, especially going into, let's call it the de facto Power 4, Power 5 level of play that he's sort of come to when you come to a program like that. It's going to take a little bit of time. It'll take more than one season. It'll take more than one transfer portal class and one recruiting class. It probably takes even more than two. And so the sum of the parts that they have, if they can play a cohesive, few drives here at the beginning, can give us a little bit of hope. But to me, it's going to be a completely different way of football as well. And so I'm excited to see what they look like, excited to see what we can trot out there at quarterback with everything back there, but the backfield in general and all those new pieces. To me, it's we have less known about this team, I think, at least nationally, at least where I'm sitting, than we know about pretty much any team out west, but especially out west, but pretty much maybe even nationally.
He's Cam Meller. You can catch his work, obviously, at the Pro Football Sports Network. Cam, I appreciate the time talking to some college football, a little NFL, too. Obviously, really appreciate your time and look forward to catching up a little bit down the line. Enjoy the rest of this Boise State, South Florida game and the rest of the action this weekend, my friend.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Cam Meller from the Pro Football Sports Network. Again, I would highly encourage everyone to follow Cam on Twitter. He always tweets out, video clips of players that he likes, and he's just knowledgeable. Like, you guys saw the range of things that I just asked him. Like, Cam Miller could tell you things about Oregon State, Texas. He's so versatile, and I love being able to get his thoughts on just everything college football. And, ultimately, I like his thoughts on Malik Murphy. I think he's, pretty accurate in the sense that, if Oregon State can develop a strong running game like we know they can and then open it up where Malik Murphy has really easy opportunities to throw, that's probably going to be in Oregon State's favor. And again, we'll ultimately see how the schedule begins to shake out. But maybe, Oregon State's one of those teams that could compete in the G5 too. I mean, it really just depends, because as I look at the schedule now, the Cal game is going to determine how the season goes for the Beavs. And ultimately, I think right now you've got two games that you feel that are going to be tough, most likely losses in Texas Tech and Oregon. But outside of that, if you beat Cal, as a Beaver fan, you're kind of thinking optimistically about the other games. And along Cam's thoughts there, he thinks it could be a minute before Jimmy Rogers is able to kind of get that Cougar machine going. Washington State and Oregon State play each other twice this year. So, again, something kind of interesting to keep tabs on as we get closer to the start of the college football season. And as we mentioned, the second half of South Florida and Boise State is kicking off right now. The Bulls have the ball, leading 10-7 currently in an injury timeout for a Boise State linebacker who's being helped off the field. But nevertheless, we'll keep tabs on this game as the second half is underway. 10-7 South Florida over Boise State. When we come back, we'll be getting you, we'll be putting a bow tie on the second hour here, getting you guys ready for the start of the 5 o'clock hour and catching up with Mike Parker here in a little bit as well. You've got the Rip City Drive with Brendan Slaughter here on a Thursday. Welcoming you back to the Rip City Drive. Brendan Slaughter here with you on a Thursday afternoon. Just wrapping up hour number 2 of the big show, getting you ready for hour number 3. We're going to be catching up with Oregon State radio voice Mike Parker coming up at the 5:20 part of the hour. Again, very excited to catch up with Mike, talk a whole bunch of different things, getting you ready for Oregon State Cal. But right here, right now, we're going to settle in on a cool story that was written on Lee Corso. And for those of you who maybe, I'd be surprised if you didn't, but Lee Corso is one of the most famous broadcasters who has ever been associated with college football, a staple on College Game Day for so long, and obviously is retiring. And, Lee Corso's impact has been felt, throughout. And I think for me personally, it's kind of interesting, but the first time I remember Lee Corso and Kirk Herbstreit and Brad Nessler, it wasn't necessarily watching College Game Day as a kid. As a kid, I wasn't always usually for us on the West Coast, I believe College Game Days wrapped up before 9 a.m. And as a kid, I wasn't always crack of dawn early to watch college football games. There's usually some more college football games for us were on the West Coast at night. So where I was introduced to Kirk Herbstreit, Lee Corso, and the whole crew was NCAA football, the video game. And I can still remember my first NCAA football video game after pleading with my parents to buy me a PlayStation 2 console. Finally got one. First game I ever had was NCAA football 06. And I can still remember every single game that you would play, whether it was Oregon State or, any school. It didn't matter. It was always when you started that game, it opened with, the characterizations of those three players. You would see ultimately Lee Corso put on the helmet or the mascot head of your team or not. So say it was, Oregon State and USC, right? You'd go through, they'd preview the matchup, and then at the very end of it all, Lee Corso would put on, either the Trojan helmet or like the beaver head, which I thought was always kind of cool. And that was, kind of my introduction to Lee Corso. And then obviously as I got older, got a chance to watch more of College Game Day and just appreciate, dare I say, the Sunshine Scooter and Not So Fast, My Friend, and some cool statistics that came out here in this story. And it talked about Lee Corso's all-time game day record. He's correctly picked 286 games against 144 incorrect picks. That gives him a 67% win percentage in picking games. Found that to be particularly interesting. And then coach's favorites. His 10 schools Corso picked the most and how they fared. So starting with Ohio State, overall a win percentage of 69%. They went 31-14 in games Corso picked. Alabama comes in at number 2. They went 28-10 in games Corso picked. 74% is the win total there. LSU 18-7. They go 72% as well. Florida 15-7, 68%. The Oregon Ducks 14-7 when Corso's picked them, 67%. Florida State 13-6, 68%. Oklahoma 11-7, 61%. Texas 10-8, 56%. USC 17-0, 100% when Corso picks them and how they fared in that game. So shout out the Trojans. Clearly liked USC during their run in the mid-2000s. And then Michigan at 10-5, 67%. Continuing on with this story, Corso's crosshairs, who he picked the most against. So coming in at number 1, he picked against Nick Saban 16 times. He picked for Nick Saban 37 times. Number 2, Bob Stoops, pure 50-50. He picked against Bob Stoops in Oklahoma 15 times and for them 15 times. Dabo Swinney, first coach that he's picked up more against than for, 15-12 against Dabo and Clemson. Really picked against Mark Richt, and I would assume Georgia, and to an extent maybe Miami. 12 times picked against them, just 3 times for. Kirby Smart, also a 50-50, 11 times picked against, 10 times picked for. And then Jim Harbaugh, picked against Jim Harbaugh 11 times, only picked for him 6 times. So continuing on, too, it also talks about Corso's top run that he had in 1999 when he went 11-0. Again, I'll run through this back in 1999, man. I was the ripe age of 3. But if you remember any of these games this year, Corso was on a roll. So he picked the favorite Penn State to open that year in September of 99. Then went Florida, got that correct, was also favorited. Then Michigan for the third win. Then picked an underdog, Michigan State, followed by a favorite, Virginia Tech. An underdog, Texas, followed by a favorite, Florida, followed by a favorite, Tennessee, followed by a favorite, Virginia Tech, followed by a favorite, Florida State, and a favorite, Florida State. So Corso went 11-0 in 1999. I thought that was pretty darn cool. Continuing on as well, Corso, not a lot of, you think about like college game day, right? It's usually not a bunch of the like massive point margin spreads, right? So you look at like Corso's top upset spread was only 9, nothing crazy like we've seen. But for example, he picked Tennessee over Alabama back in 2022. Obviously, very famous Tennessee, Rocky Top upset game. Alabama was favorited by 9, and Tennessee got that done. Elsewhere, he picked Texas over number 3 Nebraska in 1999. That was a 9-point spread he got right. 2013, he picked Oklahoma State over Baylor. That was 8.5. Then a handful of 7s as well, which was pretty interesting as well. 2023, Texas, Alabama. 2021, Navy, Army. Back in 2010, he picked number 18, Wisconsin over number 1, Ohio State. That was 7 as well. So a lot that Lee Corso has continued to do with college football over the years. We'll take a quick little stop along this and offer an update on the Boise State-South Florida game. Touchdown Bulls. All of a sudden, the Broncos are on the ropes, folks. It's 17-7 with 8:18 left in the third quarter. And again, pretty impressive play here from USF. They pull off the fake punt and are able to score a touchdown off of it. That's talk about special teams making plays right there. But back to the Lee Corso story. This was kind of interesting, too. Another graphic that talks about the kiss of death, schools that struggled when picked with win percentage. So Oklahoma State, just a 25%. They went 1-3 when picked. Iowa, 1-2 when picked. James Madison, 1-2 when picked. Kansas State, 2-4 when picked. South Carolina, 1-2. Texas A&M, 1-2. UCLA 1-2, Wisconsin 3-4, and Navy 4-5. So really, only Oklahoma State that has not quite gone up to par in that regard. But nevertheless, that is the Lee Corso data, and man, it's college football's losing a piece of itself. Obviously, Coach Corso is getting up there and recently had some medical issues and what have you. But even still, this was somebody who you can't talk college football without his legacy on the game, and it's very cool that they were able to get all that data together and kind of see ultimately how he's done picking over the years. We're going to take a quick break here on the Rip City Drive. When we come back, we'll get you ready for hour number 2 here on the big program. What's good, Rip City? Brendan Slaughter here for the Rip City Drive. Micah Parsons is officially a Green Bay Packer as Jerry Jones traded his star linebacker amid a contract dispute. He will sign a 4-year, $188 million deal with the Pack, while Dallas gets defensive tackle Kenny Clark and 2 first-round picks. Parsons' deal includes $120 million guaranteed at signing and $136 total in guarantees, the highest non-QB deal in NFL history. Oregon State football kicks off the season Saturday night against the Cal Bears at 7:30 at Reser Stadium, while the Oregon Ducks host Montana State at Autzen Stadium at 1 o'clock. Coming up here on the big show in about 20 minutes, we'll be catching up with Oregon State radio voice Mike Parker. You've got the Rip City Drive on a Thursday. Rip City Drive here on a Thursday afternoon, final hour. Hope everyone's having a great Thursday so far. Never a bad way to intro a segment with some Green Day, man. Definitely getting me ready for college football. Might have to add some Green Day to the drive down to Corvallis playlist on Saturday. Again, if you're looking for Oregon State coverage, the place to check that out is going to be at beaversedge.com. I'll be covering Oregon State's game against Cal, and the entire Beavers Edge crew will be there. And again, make sure to check that out if you're into any Oregon State Beavers content. We'll obviously be catching up with Mike Parker here in about 18 minutes. But go ahead and want to just do an Oregon State reset for you guys as we get ready for the start of the Beavers season. And again, we've previewed it in pretty good depth this week for Oregon State's matchup against Cal, but it's really going to be one of them that I think is pretty hard to get tabs on. And you look at, talking to Cam Meller last hour, and Cam kind of saying it's a little hard to get a read on that game because we don't really know what to expect from Cal. Obviously, Cal's offense is going to be much different. Brian Harsin and, to an extent, Nick Rolovich kind of taking over the offensive game plan and scheming from Justin Wilcox. As we know, Justin Wilcox, a little bit like Oregon State head coach Trent Bray, where his acumen is on the defensive side of the ball. He likes to have an offensive coordinator and kind of leave that offensive coordinator handle the offense. And dare I say, the interesting part of this matchup is, and again, I don't know how much of an impact he'll be able to have right away, but as far as impact when it comes to what Cal's able to do, Nick Rolovich is interesting because Nick Rolovich, when he was head coach of both Washington State and Hawaii, there was a lot going on in their matchups with Oregon State. I think back to 2019 when Nick Rolovich was leading the Rainbow Warriors and Oregon State played really well against that Hawaii squad, but ultimately it was Nick Rolovich who and his squad that were able to get the win. Then also he had beaten Oregon State a couple times as the Cougars head coach as well. He always seemed to have a really good game plan for playing Oregon State, and now that obviously he's down at Cal, I think we'll see how much he's able to do in that kind of offensive analyst role. But nevertheless, I think it's definitely interesting seeing what's going to be happening with the Cal offense because there's a lot to be, understood. They have a true freshman at quarterback. They have guys at running back, but nobody that really was of consequence from last year. Obviously, the Cal Bears, Jaden Ott is now at Oklahoma. Javion Thomas is now at UCLA. Those were their 2 top backs. They have plenty of guys there, but as far as a proven commodity, not so much. And we'll need to see ultimately who pops out of that backfield for the Golden Bears. Wide receiver and tight end, more just new pieces, right? So you're talking wide receiver. They have Tron Grizzle, but outside of him, you're kind of curious to see who's going to step up and be pass catchers. Same with tight end. Lost their top tight end in the portal as well. So if you're Oregon State, you have to take advantage of Cal's kind of up and, just kind of in the flux offense, so to speak. You're not going to find a better situation than playing a true freshman, playing his first collegiate game on the road in semi of a hostile environment. I think for Cal, Oregon State will have a pretty good crowd at Reser Stadium. Oregon State Reser holds about, I think, 36, 38 now. I think that'll sell out for Cal, and I think it should be, if not, a pretty close to good crowd there for the Bears or for the Beavers. And I think it's going to be a pretty tough environment for a young true freshman to play. Obviously, Jaron is as talented of a quarterback as we've seen coming out of college, very, very much in the range of Dante Moore. He was a 5-star recruit per On3's rankings. Originally was at Oregon before going to Cal. And this is a kid that can make a lot of throws. He is, definitely more talented than your average 18-year-old. And when you consider that he broke a lot of Dylan Gabriel and Tua Tagovailoa's records in the state of Hawaii, you're like, okay, this kid means business. Like, if you can do those kind of things, you're going to be a dynamic player at one point. Whether or not he spends all 3 or 4 of his collegiate years at Cal, I am a little skeptical of. But nevertheless, you look at like Jaron and you're like, hey, you got Brian Harsin, and Brian Harsin has historically put together some pretty good offenses. And I think in that respect, Cal could be intriguing this year. But in game one against, Oregon State on the road, I don't know how effective that offense is going to be. On the defensive side of the ball, that's where Oregon State's challenge is going to be in this game. You look at what the Golden Bears return, particularly a strong defensive line, Cade Ulave at linebacker. They lost some pieces to the draft in the back end, but added some pieces in the portal too. The thing that perhaps impressed me the most with that was, Cal lost some guys to the NFL. Justin Wilcox was able to reload, bring in more guys. Like, if you want to play good defense, that's kind of something you play at Cal. It's a calling card. And from what I've been able to learn from talking to people around the Cal program, it really seems like they're going to have another strong defense this year. We'll obviously see what the offense brings, but they're expecting another strong defensive unit from the Golden Bears. So for me, it's going to be, can Oregon State get the running game going, right? Can you get Anthony Hankerson? Can you get Salah Adina-Law? Can you get Marcus Crosby, Cornell Hatcher, Jake Reichel, whoever it is going behind that offensive line? Can you get, Malik Murphy time to throw, able to go through his progressions in the play action passing game, protect him? As we mentioned, Oregon State largely starting some new pieces on the offensive line, guys with experience, but nevertheless still new pieces that are fitting and playing for the first time. And ultimately, we're going to have to see who wins that battle in the trenches. I think the Beavers will be able to find some success running the ball. Expect Ryan Gunderson, Oregon State's offensive coordinator, to have a few more things up his sleeve as far as, tactical scheme kind of things. I think last year we saw what was a very basic Oregon State offense that Gundy wanted to run with, Giovanni McCoy, Ben Gulbranson, and Jabari Johnson. Just not quite as effective as they needed to be. Throwing the football, running the ball still had its moments, but not as effective as it needed to be. This year, for Oregon State to take that leap and be better and be that, 6, 7, 8, potentially 9-win team that they could be, it has to start with the passing game. We know Oregon State will be able to run the ball well. They've done it for so long. It's so much a part of their MO. That doesn't worry me. I think they'll have a group that can open up holes in the run game. You look at the schedule outside of a few matchups. Cal's one, Tech is another, Oregon's another. Outside of that, there's not really a defensive line unit or front seven that gives you a whole lot of worry. So I think the Beavers will be able to run the ball, especially with their, strong cast of running backs that they have. But again, I think ultimately, we talked about X factors in the NFL earlier. I think ultimately Oregon State's X factor on offense is going to be Malik Murphy. How much better can he make this offense? Can he, and I think going along with that too, it's disappointing that you're not going to be able to see Darius Clemens, Oregon State's presumed number 2 wide receiver who suffered an Achilles injury this year in training camp, because Trent Walker, after almost 1,000 yards a year ago, I think he was going to be another go-to target for Malik. He's that kind of real glue hands go-to. You need that conversion. He's your guy. But as far as that kind of dynamic, taller, more athletic presence, that was going to be Darius Clemens. And I think that's going to be something the Beavers miss, obviously. And then going along with that, who can be the number 2, number 3, or the tight end pass catchers to step up, right? We've seen some good things from Taz Reddix. We've seen some good things from David Wells. We've seen some good things from Eddie Freoff. But taking it from practice and in fall camp, to quote the great Allen Iverson, we're talking about practice here. And, we can sit there and say we've seen these guys look so great in fall camp, but until you take it from fall camp into the game, that's where you're going to see exactly where, it's put up or shut up time. And honestly, I go back to last year and knowing what I know now, it was easy to see. There were some issues last year coming out of fall camp, and there were warts and some warning signs for this Oregon State roster coming out of camp. And ultimately, I think you saw that play out on the field over the course of the year. The Beavers had some injuries, they had some inconsistent play, and I think that's why you saw the 5-7 season that was, in addition to some other things, Trent Bray being a first-time head coach, the schedule kind of getting tougher at parts. But nevertheless, I really do think that Oregon State has a chance to kind of put that season away. They addressed a lot of their issues, and again, there's 3 games that I think will be key. Obviously, Cal right off the bat, and then, you've got those 2 matchups against Texas Tech and Oregon. I think those 2 games are going to be tough, but if you can beat Cal and then you kind of just pencil in that those games will be tough, I think most of the games throughout the year, you're going to like where you are. I mean, Sam Houston, Tulsa, Washington State twice, Wake Forest, Lafayette. I mean, there are wins on this schedule for Oregon State if they can show they're a better football team than they were a year ago. And I think from everything that I've seen, there's no reason to think that Oregon State can't be a better football team. It all starts with the guy under center, and Malik Murphy is shown capable of being that guy. And, now he's just got to take it from the practice field to camp, and I think, or practice field to the games. And I think with a strong running game that he's had, we'll go back to a couple of years ago where we've seen the most successful version of Oregon State, where it's a strong running game, opens up that play action pass. And because, Oregon State's run game is such a threat, that play action pass leaves receivers in one-on-one situations where they can find holes in the defense and truly be effective. And ultimately, I think that's going to be the key to success for Oregon State in this game against Cal. We'll be catching up with Mike Parker here in just a few minutes to get his thoughts on the game. But ultimately, that's where I think it stands. I think Oregon State has a great chance to win this game if they play well. But like any first game, it's going to be rough. There's going to be some penalties, some inconsistencies, some frustrations, and probably some good too. So ultimately, you have to hope that Oregon State will have more good things than bad things happen to them, and the opposite for Cal. But I think considering I like Oregon State's quarterback position, cohesiveness a little bit more right now, and the fact that I think Oregon State has the more cohesive team as Cal's kind of still putting the pieces together with a new roster. I think that gives me the slight edge over the Bears in this matchup, but ultimately we'll see what old Doc Parker thinks about the matchup as well. And make sure to stay locked in to BeaversEdge.com for all the latest preview for Oregon State Cal. Just up today at BeaversEdge.com, we've got our full visitor list. You want to know which high school kids are visiting this weekend? You can check us out at Beavers Edge on 3. And also got a little bit more on the Cal Bears as we're got 5 questions with a Cal expert. You want to know everything about the Cal Bears, you can check that out at BeaversEdge.com as well. We got a great deal going right now where you can join $1 for the first week and also get access to The Athletic as well. Last thing here, the South Florida Bulls have really opened things up on the Boise State Broncos now. It is 24-7 down there in Tampa with $1:44 left in the third quarter. Boise State, way different than that Boise State team we saw last season. Bulls all over the Broncos. You've got the Rip City Drive. When we come back, Mike Parker. Welcoming you back to the Rip City Drive here on a Thursday afternoon. Brendan Slaughter here with you. Final hour, final guest of the day. Pleased to welcome back to the program a man who needs no introduction. He's the voice of the Oregon State Beavers, the one, the only, Mike Parker, back on the Rip City Drive. Doc, how are things, my friend?
Brendan, nice to hear your voice. Congratulations on hosting solo. I've been driving around a little bit down here in Corvallis and tuning in here and there. Great job. Proud of you. Thanks for having me on in your fill-in time for Chad, and thanks for bringing me back with little old-school Bruce Hornsby. And his "That's Just the Way It Is" sort of an anthem that I think all of us in Beaver Nation, as we still, I know many people have probably just completely moved on. Well, okay, we got a new Pac-12 coming in. That's it. That's the world we're in. That's just the way it is. But for me, it's still a little bit disconcerting to think about all that's happened going back to June 30th of 2022 to where we are now and all that's happened. So in that sense, the game Saturday night to open year two in the Trent Bray era, it has kind of a familiar throwback feel. It's not only Pac-12 after dark or Pac-10 after dark. These are two old Pac-8 rivals after dark. So it's going back a ways. The 30th consecutive season playing Cal. So it's an old familiar foe. It's a challenging game for both teams, an important game for both to set a tone. And the closer we get to it, the more excited I am, and that's just the way it is. We got to just kind of accept the new world, this last year of independence, look forward to the new world of the Pac-12, and hope that this thing can get going on a strong note Saturday, and I think it will for the Beavs.
Absolutely. Catching up with Oregon State radio voice Mike Parker. First of all, Mike, got to give Michael Shacker the shout-out for the music intro. Got to give him all the credit there.
Thank you, Hacker. Thank you,
as
Hacker.
he absolutely nailed it. And then, to be honest, Mike, I appreciate the kind words. I mean, I was just thinking as you were saying that, I think 18-year-old Brendan, when I first met you, Mike, down in Corvallis, man, to hear those words and just hear that, you're obviously proud, it means the world to me. I appreciate you saying that. And obviously, we've been through a lot together over our journeys, man. And it's
yes, we have. So how old are you now, Brendan? Just 8. I remember you, and I've always loved your love for the Beavers and your energy and your work ethic and getting – you get after and you've done well. But tell me now, it's going to pain me to hear the answer, but how old are you now?
Yeah, so I am the ripe age of 29 now, Doc. So now 30's coming up.
That long?
Yep, 30's coming up. It's starting to hit me already and all that. And it's crazy. The more, I listen to my folks just growing up, they're like, the older you get, the quicker time moves. And I swear,
no
Doc,
doubt.
It's
true.
It's unbelievable how much I'm like, even compared to 4 or 5 years ago, time just it just keeps going.
I wish Einstein and Oppenheimer had talked about that phenomenon, but what they talked about at the pond was a little more significant, I suppose, as the end of the film Oppenheimer depicts what they were talking about and what Strauss, Robert Downey Jr. was so worried about, the narcissism and all in all of us thinking, boy, they're talking about me. What bad things is Oppie saying about me right now to Einstein? They weren't talking about him at all. They were talking about far more significant things. But somehow the phenomenon of time speeding up somehow seems true to all of us. And I wish somebody would break that down someday.
Absolutely. And Mike, just more reason why I know you and I are just like two peas in a pod, man. You like Oppenheimer. It's one of my favorite movies. So that's just awesome.
Great.
I love to hear it. But let's go ahead and get into the Beavs, Doc. Obviously, after, a long off season, a lot of player movement, spring football, fall camp, twists and turns. We're finally nearing the start of this Beavers season, Mike. And just kind of from your thoughts, watching the team in camp, what's kind of your overall kind of thoughts on this group as we start the season?
I've enjoyed the camp. I know you've seen more of it than I have with my summer league, Corvallis Knights, West Coast League duties. Another fun year doing that. I love it. But it makes it harder for me. And so I really enjoy the work you do on Beaver's Edge and your podcast and so on, because it's very instructive and helpful. To kind of, when I'm missing some things that a lot of other reporters are able to kind of see on a more regular basis. But what I did see in my conversations with coaches and players have indicated a real upbeat, positive vibe and atmosphere, high expectations, confidence, and I think it's justified. I do think this game, there was a time in the spring and maybe even as I was easing into preparation for the Cal game. That's obviously accelerated in the last couple of weeks and creating depth charts and reading. And I'm becoming more and more nervous, Brendan, about the nature
Yeah.
of this challenge in the opener Saturday. If a month or so ago, I would have thought, yeah, hey, the Beavs are going to. Cal has reloaded in a better way than I think some of the early indications. Everybody talked about how gutted they were in the portal and new identity, as I've heard you talk about, and how a true freshman quarterback, what's Trent Bray have in store for him. I think all of that is still true, and the Beavers will have plenty in store to give the kid a fiery baptism as a starter in college football. But I do think Cal is better than what a lot of people think, just based on everything I'm seeing, reading, hearing. Talking to Mike Pulaski, their former great quarterback and radio analyst today, he made me even more nervous with his evaluation. So as much as I've enjoyed the vibe in the Beaver camp, and I think they're prepared to have a really good year, a really big bounce back year from a year ago, we're going to learn a lot together Saturday just about maybe what the ceiling, how good can they be? If they beat Cal, I don't care what the final score is. You know, I heard you and Ryan talking about it a little bit in terms of maybe a low-scoring game, and it surprises us, whatever the case. Just win, I'm going to feel a heck of a lot better about the rest of the run if they find a way to win Saturday night against a Cal team that throttled them last year. Both teams are significantly different, but if the Beavers bounce back at home and get it done, I'm going to feel good about what's ahead.
Absolutely, and you'd be remiss, Mike. Obviously, I think Trent Bray kind of set the record straight on Monday and was like, you know, what happened last year has no indication. But I was talking with Ryan, as you mentioned, like I think to an extent, Mike, there's probably a few players who are just human who are like, man, that was a pretty rough game last year. Want to play better, and I would argue that I think you could take your pick. I don't know if Cal or Air Force was kind of the low point in Oregon State's season last year, but you could make a case for both. That Cal game was a drubbing, and I think that's putting it lightly. But as I've mentioned, Oregon State's team, completely different. Cal's team, Fernando Mendoza's not there anymore. Jaden Ott's not there anymore. So it's just the year-to-year thing. Like, I know Beaver fans probably like, well, Oregon State will be real motivated after last year. But it's a different group of guys, and college football is so year-to-year now, Mike. Like, there's no 3-4 year plan for teams anymore.
Not really, and I've even seen when there was more continuity within rosters, dramatic swings in the Beaver-Cal series. The fact that they're playing each other for a 30th consecutive year is good to know, and I've seen a good share, most of those 30 years in games. And, from one year to the next, this is a little before your time, but I've seen the Beavers win in Berkeley and then come home to Aaron Rodgers, beat Aaron Rodgers down there with Steven Jackson running wild, beat Aaron. His worst game statistically of his football career was against Oregon State at Memorial Stadium in Berkeley in 2003. Beavers 35, Cal's 21. The following year, with a lot of the same personnel, Aaron Rodgers comes to Reser and wins 49-7.
Right.
At Reser.
I remember that one too. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it was awful. It was just an awful day. The Beavers go down there in 05 and win, with Evanson Bernard having a huge day. And then Cal comes in 06 and wins 41-13 in Corvallis. So one year to the next, it's impossible to take too much from one result. But I guess what I'm saying is you're right. Last year's matchup with Cal was not a good matchup, and I'm not sure even now with the Beavers trying to make sure they're cohesive and strong on the offensive line, still waiting on reinforcements there. It will all start up front in the trenches for both teams. The Beavers, I think, are significantly improved on the defensive front and their ability to stop the run and affect the passer. I think they're going to do that extremely well. My biggest concern, quite honestly, is, against what Pulaski says is the most experienced and talented front that Justin Wilcox has had in his 9 years as the head coach at Cal. He says that immediately makes me nervous with some sort of guys that we're still waiting to see how good the tackles can be. I think the guard positions are going to be fine. Van Wells is going to be solid over the ball in the offensive line. I think there's some good guys at the tight end spot who can block and be receiving threats. But, how are the tackles? Guys being asked to do some things going to hold up and give Malik Murphy a chance to hit his receivers, have some time to do that. If Malik has that, I think he's going to be fine. But that's the big if for me right now. And then, can they create enough creases for a run game that I think in theory is really good? You bring back a 1,000-yard rusher and an improved and stronger Salah Allah. I think that's a good place to start. But to me, that's where it's all going to start, is up front. and how much Mike Cavanaugh has been able to bring this group along.
Absolutely, and I just going along with that, Mike, in my conversations with Cal's On 3 publisher, I was kind of pretty blunt, asking like, hey, Justin Wilcox's defense, that's as reliable as death and taxes, right? And he's like, oh yeah, no, this is going to be another strong year. But before we get back into that, Mike, give me just a moment, because you triggered a little nostalgia for me, and I was thinking like, just along those lines and the great matchups the Beavers and Cal have had. I can vividly remember your call in 2007 when Oregon State had that incredible win over what should have been, what we all know would have been number one Cal if they had won that game. And then notably, the more so in highlights as your boy was pretty young. But I remember your call from 00, the famous 2000 season down there in Berkeley too, as that turned out to be more of an exciting game than maybe expected.
Well, those back-to-back years in 99 and 2000 are memorable wins. 99 got the Beavers into securing themselves a winning season, and Tavita Moala, rest his soul, picking up a Kyle Bowler fumble and taking to the house to take a 10-7 game to a 17-7 Beaver win and a 6-3 record, and just a huge night at Reser Stadium that none of us will ever forget. Then the following year, the Fiesta Bowl year, the game the Beavers had pretty well in hand. I remember they had a clinching first down that would have enabled them to run out the clock or something to that effect. And T.J. Hushmanzada gets an unsportsmanlike penalty call, which was a bit of a sign of things to come for the, and how that whole team operated.
Sure, yeah.
Bless their hearts, they were as talented and great and emotional and fire as a team Oregon State's ever had. Penalties did hurt them occasionally, and TJ himself said afterwards, man, I can't do that again. It almost cost us the game, because instead of the game being over, Cal goes down and scores, tightens it to a 6-point game. The Beavers were able to recover an onside kick and win, but an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty at the wrong time. We saw that even in week 0 with Stanford and Hawaii. I was watching that game a little bit. I don't know if you watched any of it. I wanted to see how Ben Gulbranson operated on the farm. So I was watching that, and I thought, Clay Patterson, their 7th-year guy and transfer from Yale, who should know better, going into the TikTok, whatever dance mode he was in after a huge play. Now, I'm not too up on all of that. And Logan Ryan says to Rich Waltz, he says, yeah, you've seen that on TikTok, haven't you, Rich? You've seen that, the guy in the boat, I don't know what he's talking about either. Rich Waltz, to his credit, kind of goes, maybe, a little bit like Seinfeld's Mulva, maybe. It was a very hesitant maybe on Rich Waltz's part, who, was lying. He didn't see it on his TikTok feed. But I don't know if you saw that, but that play, that single play, I think cost Stanford the game. That play, that celebration in that moment. Now, I think he would have been fine had he not extended it. But all of these games that have come down to these close games, and I think this one could be close, very tight and competitive Saturday, everybody's got to be pretty smart when it comes to stuff like that.
Just last thing on that, Mike, then we'll circle back to Cal. But just one more thing on the nostalgia train, because it's great timing that I actually had you on. We got to talking about the 2000 season, because I was actually having this conversation with with my parents not too long ago, and I was like, can you believe that it's been 25 years since that 2000 season? And I'll be honest with you, Mike, like I wouldn't be here talking to you today if I didn't, at 4 or 5 years old, mom and dad putting the Fast Track to the Fiesta on the VHS. And I mean, I grew up watching that, Mike, and it's crazy to me that
really, that's cool.
Oh yeah.
That's cool. Do you have any recollection of it? 4 or 5 is awfully young. My first memory in life, to be honest with you, and it's scary, but the very first thing I remember in life was November 22nd, 1963, because I was the one who informed. I was watching television, cartoons or whatever, and I come and tell my mom about what's happened in Dallas, and my mom throws her hands up to her face and runs to the TV and cries. I have that image in my mind, and that's the first thing I really have a recollection of. Were you being toted along to Reser Stadium that year by your parents?
Yes.
Do you have any feel at all for that 2000 season, like remembering an emotion or a feeling that year?
No, there's I would have to confirm, and like I said, I'm sure that I went to at least a couple games that year, again, the ripe age of 4. But the thing that stands out in my head, Mike, and it's actually something I still give my folks a hard time about, They took me down to Arizona for the Fiesta Bowl.
Yeah.
But they
Oh,
left
wow.
me with grandparents down in Arizona so they could go to the game. My mom and I were actually just discussing that the other day. I'm like, you guys were young adults. I don't blame you for not wanting to bring the kid, but I bet that was legendary. And she was like, oh, it's a night Beaver fans will never forget. And, going way down the rabbit hole. But yeah, I'm like, it's just crazy to me how quickly time flies, Mike.
And that tape you refer to, I thought that the Oregon State marketing people with that fast track to the Fiesta, I do think you're not alone in a younger generation, and people a little bit older than you even have told me the old VHS days. People have told me they watched it a lot because it was filled with so many great moments.
It was awesome.
That team, the talent level, the excitement, and I thought the producers of that video did a great job with it. So I'm glad you brought that up. That was an amazing 25-year-ago run, and as we all know, time's gone fast, very fast since then.
Oh yeah, and it's true. Like I tell my brothers, Mike, I'm like, oh yeah, the VHS and whatnot, and I got to give a shout out to some Oregon State fans. A couple have put it on YouTube now, which I think is fantastic because
nice.
It's nice to be able to, every now and again jump back in that Wayback Machine because obviously you're all over that, Mike. I can remember hearing your calls growing up, so definitely some fun nostalgia there. But going back to the matchup against Cal this weekend, I want to get your thoughts on this, Mike. Despite even Ryan and I and Beaver's Edge kind of prepping for this game, I still haven't nailed down the pronunciation for Cal's true freshman starting quarterback last name yet. Have you nailed it down? I've tried it like 5 to 10 times. It still doesn't roll off my tongue super well.
No, and it's not, and it won't, and I was glad to hear. I have it as Jaron Kiave Sangapolutele. Jaron Kiave Sangapolutele.
There you go.
I think that's correct. Now, Sangapolutele, the Kiave part, today when we had Mike Pulaski, the radio analyst for Cal on our local show, the Joe Beaver Show, when I asked, of course, we asked about the true freshman quarterback, the former 5-star Cal commit, flips to Oregon, flips back to Cal. It's a strange saga, but he ends up at Cal. But he dropped the Kiave altogether. I know they're talking about calling him JKS just to shorten it up, but Pulaski just kept saying Jaron Sangapolutele.
Interesting.
Jaron Sangapolutele. So if that's okay for their radio guy and the great Mike Pulaski, that's going to be okay for me too. So if you try to say each time Jaron Kiava Ponga Solitelli back to throw, the ball will be out of his hands and either complete or incomplete by the time you finish the last name dropping into the pocket. So we got to find a way to shorten it up a little bit. But his talent level, Pulaski used the term, quote, ungodly talent level, unquote. So I hope it's sort of unwieldy at least Saturday, but I think he'll make some plays. He's just too talented not to. But I do think Trent and his defense is going to have some things up their sleeve to make it difficult for him or any quarterback to operate. And that's going to be true all year long. And I think it'll be true for a true freshman as well.
And I'd kind of be curious, Mike, this kind of putting you on the spot a little bit, but the comparison that Ryan and I made on our podcast leading into this game was, as good of a true freshman can be. And sometimes there are true freshmen who are really great. Like I think a couple years ago, the expectations for Dante Moore when he was playing for Chip Kelly in UCLA, and then Dante came up to Oregon State, played a pretty good defense that year and looked like a true freshman. Have you ever, and again, there may be times, but I'm trying to think, has there been a true freshman play against the Beavers that has like really stood out to you as like, wow. I'm trying to think if like, was Luke Falk a true freshman when he came in against the Oregon State with the Cougs?
I don't believe he was a true.
Okay.
No, and Willie Tui Tama.
Right.
There have been other. I think redshirt. Now Tui Tama may have been a true and thrived, but that was later in the season, though. That was later in the season in 2005. So that's a good question. True freshman. Jared Goff. Jared did not have, and this is Jaron. The JKS is the first true freshman quarterback to start for Cal in program history, and the other was Jared Goff. And I know the Beavers beat Goff the first time they played him, but I do think Goff he flashed pretty well. When you talk about Dante Moore, I mean, Ryan Gunderson, the Beavers now OC, was the OC for Chip when UCLA came to town, and he said that Trent's defense is always tough to play against, and he goes up against it all the time in practice. And he just said, there's a lot for a quarterback to process. So I do think this kid has played a lot of different styles of defenses and play, and he'll make some plays. He'll do some good things. But I do think in the end, the cumulative effect of a Trent Bray-led defense with the multiple types of coverage and blitzes and coming from different places, it's going to be hard for the kid, I think, to have a great 4 quarters consistently. And I think the Beavers can disrupt him enough to get him off his rhythm and find ways to maybe turn him over, get to him. That's the biggest thing, too. When I talk about the offensive line, to me, that's the biggest single question mark. How well will they hold up under the lights Saturday night? I think they will, because they have one of the best coaches in America, working with that unit. But the other side, can the Beavers get home? And can all the blitzes and the aggressiveness that Trent loves to play with, can they get home enough to get sacks and disrupt JKS? To me, those are the big storylines in this game. And I think the answer, we're going to see the Beavers, have some moments where maybe things do break down a little bit and they don't execute flawlessly, but I think they're going to do enough to make it tough on that true freshman kid.
Just a couple more questions here from Mike Parker on the Rip City Drive. Mike, obviously you talked about it a little bit there, but Trent Bray, naming himself defensive coordinator, and just from my conversations with him, we had him on earlier this week and throughout spring, throughout fall, he just seems to be just so much more upbeat and positive. Like, he seems so happy to be back coaching again. And along those same lines, Oregon State really struggled to get after the quarterback last year. That's kind of something he was good at. How much do you think he can kind of elevate that kind of edge rushing again?
I think a lot. And not only just the edge rushing, but the variety of blitz packages that he can dial up and bringing stuff and challenging ways, disguising things, unleashing a lot of different looks that the quarterback has to account for. I think it's going to be the Beavers will be dramatically improved. Now, 7 sacks that's not setting the bar, in terms of the number the Beavers had last year. They will exceed that. I don't think they'll do that Saturday night, per se, in one or two games, but I do think we'll see that number, easily eclipsed in the first month of the season, and Trent will just build on it. And you're right about his I could tell last year during the course of what became a more and more frustrating season as things went along that he was almost champing at the bit. You could just feel like trying to get back to where he really thrives, and that is running and coaching the defense. And it's worked well. Pete Carroll was his own coordinator with USC, winning a couple of national championships. I mean, you can do it. He can do it. Certainly, he's got a great supporting cast around him, veteran coaches who are helping him deal with other head coacherly things. He is the head coach. There's no mistake about that. But he's also back where he belongs, calling the defense. And that gives me as much confidence and excitement for the year as almost anything about the 2025 team.
Oh, I'm absolutely excited as well, Mike. And I think, Trent being back on that side, there's going to be, more excitement on defense, the Beavers being healthier, having some new pieces. And obviously, it's going to be a dandy of a game. Oregon State just 1.5-point favorite over Cal in the matchup. Again, you can catch Mike Parker on The Voice. Again, he will have the complete play-by-play of the game. Mike, appreciate the time today, and look forward to catching up down at Reeser on Saturday night. It's going to be under the lights. Looking forward to it.
Brendan, it's an exciting time, no doubt, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again. I can't believe it's 29. That's incredible to me. But thank you for the reminiscences, too. I've loved being around this program and people like yourself coming up through the program and now making your own mark in the world. It's been fun to watch. I've always appreciated you, and I look forward to seeing you Saturday. And thank you for bringing up Fast Track to the Fiesta and
Absolutely.
YouTube. I had no idea. I may have to look that thing up. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I hope the Beavers can make their own memories and good ones this year, and I think they're going to. I think a bowl game awaits them. A double-digit win season is possible, I think, this year for this team if things play out as I think they have a chance to, and it all gets started Saturday, and I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on, Brendan. I appreciate it.
Mike Parker, the best, the one and the only. We'll go ahead and take a quick break on the Rip City Drive. When we come back, a bow tie on today's Thursday show. Welcoming you back to the Rip City Drive. Awesome music choice by producer Michael Shacker leading us into the final segment here. Big shout out to Mike Parker for joining us last segment. For those of you who appeased me and stayed tuned as we jumped through the nostalgia bandwagon, all these times I talked to Mike and I finally had to be like, we got to talk a little fast track to the Fiesta, man, because I don't know if there's one thing that determined where I was going to be as like a professional and a career and something that I would have cared up more than growing up watching that VHS at home, at grandparents' house, wherever, listening to Mike Parker, running through that schedule, having Oregon State only lose one game that whole year. Like, for me, like, I get it. The elite seasons are far and few between sometimes for Oregon State, but that season 25 years ago, it's amazing to me how quickly time flies. And for someone who doesn't really recollect that year being the ripe age of 4, it's one of those things I'll never forget. And definitely cool to be able to catch up with Mike and talk about that. I hope he gets the chance to look at it on YouTube as well, because shoot, I can even tell you, like, not too long ago, I think before like fall camp started this year, I'm like, I want to go back and watch the 2000 fast track and go to some of my favorite parts, particularly that bowl game against Notre Dame. I mean, you're just like, wow, like it's almost unbelievable as a fan. Now you're just kind of like, how'd that happen? So those who got to experience that in 2000, man, I still continue to be jealous. And it was obviously great to catch up with Mike, one of my great mentors, confidants, whatever you want to say, friends in the business. Absolutely appreciate him. And also TJ Mathewson and Cam Meller as well. Great group of guests today. Also, update, folks. Boise's going down. It's 31-7 South Florida over Boise with 6:34 left in the fourth. Mark Madsen is frustrated visibly. Boise's going to start 0-1, folks. So that's interesting. Number 25 is going to go down to start the year. Congrats to the Bulls. That's going to be an awesome marquee win for them. Big shout out to Michael Shacker for producing the show. We're going to be wrapping it up today. Thanks for everyone for listening, all of our guests all week. You've got the Rip City Drive with Brendan Slaughter. Chad Dewing back from his vacation on the mic with you guys tomorrow. Hope everyone has a great weekend. Make sure you stay locked to beaversedge.com for all my Oregon State coverage this weekend. You guys have been awesome. Look forward to next time.
at second. And it's the second baseman Goodwin bird dogging to keep him close. Again, in case there's a play at the plate. There's a line drive toward left center field. Play it on the bounce. In fact, it bounces past. Misplayed by J.R. Freethy. That ball bounced past it. Misplayed by J.R. Freethy. 2-0 Hillsborough. A rocket to left center. To third. Hernandez's throw comes into the cutoff man. Sliding in safely into third base. Christopher Terrain. 2-0 Hillsborough. A rocket to left center. Misplayed by
trust that guy number 4 on center is going to run it down.
In Drew, we trust.
Works because of the rhythm.
Yeah. No. What is it? Oh, thank you.
For Gino Groover.
Lou James.
Yes. And the ball game today is here at Hillsborough Ballpark, one of only 4 games remaining here in this yard. The Hops, of course, had hoped to send out this yard with a playoff appearance. That ain't happening. They're not making it. They got eliminated last week. But they're trying to have a successful final homestand. The opener of the series came on Tuesday, and it was a 9-0 loss to Vancouver. Yesterday, the Hops had hoped to turn the tables. There was no score in the bottom half of the first inning, and the Hops had a run home, and Christopher Tureen at the plate with Drew Jones at second base. Jones at second, and it's the second baseman Goodwin bird-dogging to keep him close, again in case there's a play at the plate. There's a line drive toward left center field. Moving to his left is Freethy. He has to play it on the bounce. In fact, it bounces past him. Here comes Jones to score. Tureen around second. Coming to third. Hernandez's throw comes into the cutoff man. Sliding in safely into third base, Christopher Tureen. 2-0 Hillsborough. A rocket to left center. Misplayed by J.R. Freethy. And it ended up going the books as a triple after some consideration by the official score. So the Hops would score twice in that first inning. Then in the top half of the second, David Hageman, who had worked a perfect first inning with a couple of strikeouts, struck out the first Canadian to face him in the second, Carter Cunningham, and Cutter Coffey came up. 1-0 to Coffey. He swings, sends a fly ball toward deep left center field. Jones on the run. Jones on the track. Reaches out to backhand it. That is a home run in any other park in the league, but not here, a place where fly balls go to die. It's 412 to left center. That ball was probably hit a good 395, and Jones ran it down.
Yeah, just about any other park in the land that is over the wall or off the wall, but anything that's going to stay in the yard with any kind of loft to it, you trust that that guy, number 4 out in center, is going to run it down.
In Drew, we trust. Yeah, this pitching staff has been trusting him out in the outfield all season long. So the Hops led 2-0 going to the bottom half of the second in yesterday's game. With 1 out and nobody on base, Anderson Rojas singled to right. Jeremiah Boyd singled to right. Slade Caldwell was at the plate for the Hops. 1-1 to Caldwell. Slade swings and grounds one through the hole. Left side base hit. Rojas scores. Boyd held at third by Reed as Freethy gets it into Keys. A single for Caldwell, his second hit of the game. Going the opposite way with both. RBI number 17 at this level for Slade. 3-0 Hillsborough. First and third, 1 out. Hansel Luis coming up. 0-1 pitch. Swinging a line drive towards center. Hernandez coming on. He's got to play it on a hop. Boyd trots home. Down to second goes Caldwell. And the Hops have another run. They lead it 4-0. They have 4 consecutive singles. And if that isn't the Hop season in microcosm, Matt, what is?
Hansel Luis leading the league in sacrifice flies. You'd like to take half of those and put him in the home run column. He'd be right where you'd want him to be if you're in the Diamondbacks organization. That power's going to come for the rest of the season. He will pass Andy Ursay in the all-time games played list here, but he has come a long way.
Line drive, base hit left field. Caldwell scores. Luis around second. Freedy gets it in. 5-0 Hops. And the Hops would tack on a run in the fourth inning, a 6-0 lead. Vancouver scored twice in the fifth, 3 times in the seventh to cut the deficit to just 1. They would strand runners at second and third in that inning, but the Hops came back in the bottom of the seventh inning and scored 4 times to open it up again. One more run in the bottom of the eighth. They went on to an 11-6 win in the second game of the 6-game series. Game 3 tonight. Only 4 games remaining here at Hillsborough Ballpark. Hi, everybody. Along with Matt Rickert and Seth Hoyland, I'm Rich Burke. Welcome to Hillsborough Hops Baseball here on Rip City Radio, 620 a.m. on the internet at ripcityradio.com. Denny Larondo going to get the start for the Hops tonight. And, Seth, you saw him work on Friday at Eugene, and he had his struggles, just an inning and 2/3.
Yeah, he sure did. Struggled to find the zone there against Eugene, but good sign for Larondo. He's pitched in 2 games against Vancouver this year, 2-0 record with a 2.35 ERA, 7 2/3 innings against the Seas this year, just 2 earned runs. So he has had success against Vancouver this year.
And Matt, as you and I have talked about, it's not how you start, it's how you finish in baseball. It's an old cliche. The Hops have some players who are finishing strongly.
Right. They've got several players in the top 10 in batting in the month of August, and I think 4 different Hops hitting over 300 in the month of August. Still not hitting for power. The home run leader, in fact, the Hops OPS leader in the month of August and slugging leader is Christopher Tureen, not the guy you would expect to be carrying the load in terms of power.
Not the guy you would expect at all. And Larondo for the Hops, right-hander Silvano Echeverria will go for the Vancouver Canadians. 3 levels combined this year, rookie level, low A and high A. 4 wins and 2 losses, 1.89 ERA. This will be his 18th game and his 13th start, just the 28th game and the 23rd start of his 2-year pro career. Canadians on the verge of being eliminated with their loss yesterday and Eugene's win at Everett. The Canadians' elimination number stands at 2. If they lose and Eugene wins in Everett, then Eugene will wrap up the second half title. It's already a foregone conclusion. Eugene will be facing Everett in the Northwest League Championship Series. Vancouver, it's possible, could finish with the best overall record in the league without making the playoffs. They had a very good finish to the first half of the season, and they've had a strong second half as well, but Everett was just a little bit better in that first half, and Eugene has been better than Vancouver